Welcome to Midnight Lullaby, a place where every shadow tells a story and help you get into sleep today. So before that, like the video and subscribe the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now, let the darkness cradle you as the tale begins. The house smells like fresh paint and possibility. When I first step through the front door, with the real estate agent's keys, still warm in my palm, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a kitchen that opens onto a living room with built-in bookshelves and windows that face east toward the morning sun. It's everything I've been searching for since the divorce. A place to start over, to rebuild the quiet life I thought I'd lost forever. The basement is partially finished. The agent had mentioned during our walkthrough, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors as she led me through each room. Previous owner used it as a workshop. Good storage space. And there's already electrical run down there if you want to expand. I hadn't paid much attention to the basement during that initial visit. The main floor captured my imagination with its crown molding and original hardwood, and I was already envisioning how my furniture would fit in these rooms, how I would arrange my books on those built in shelves. The basement seemed like a bonus feature, extra space I might use someday for a home office or exercise room. It's only after I've moved in, after the boxes are unpacked and the utilities transferred into my name, that I spend any real time in the lower level of the house. The basement stairs are solid oak, recently refinished, leading down to a space that's larger than I expected. The previous owner had paneled the walls with knotty pine and installed drop ceiling tiles that hide the ductwork and plumbing. There's a small workshop area with a pegboard for tools, a utility room housing the water heater and furnace, and a long recreation room that could easily accommodate a pool table or home theater setup. The lighting is adequate. Fluorescent fixtures that buzz slightly when they first flicker to life, and there's even a half bath tucked under the stairs. Someone had put real effort into making this basement livable, and I find myself thinking about how I might use the space once I'm fully settled upstairs. That's when I first hear the knocking. It's subtle at first, easy to dismiss as the settling sounds that old houses make as they adjust to changes in temperature and humidity. A soft tap coming from somewhere behind the paneled walls, rhythmic enough to catch my attention, but quiet enough that I might have imagined it. I'm standing near the workshop area, examining a built-in workbench that the previous owner left behind when the sound starts. 3 soft knocks, a pause, then 3 more knocks. The spacing between the knocks is perfectly even, like a metronome keeping time at a leisurely tempo. I press my ear against the pine paneling, trying to locate the source of the sound. The knocking seems to come from the wall that separates the main basement area from what I assume is crawl space or utility access behind the furnace. It's not an exterior wall. The house sits on a full foundation, and I can see daylight coming through the small basement windows that face the backyard. The knocking continues for about 5 minutes, then stops abruptly, leaving behind the familiar silence of an empty house. I make a mental note to check with the previous owner about the house's plumbing and heating systems. Old pipes can make odd noises as they expand and contract, and the furnace is probably due for a maintenance check anyway. It's the kind of minor issue that comes with buying an older home, and I'm prepared to handle whatever small repairs might be needed. But the knocking returns the next night. Same time, around 9:30 p.m., just as I'm settling into my evening routine of reading in the living room. Same rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, continuing for several minutes before stopping completely. I go downstairs to investigate, walking slowly around the basement perimeter, pressing my ear against different sections of the wall. The sound definitely comes from behind the paneling on the east wall, the one that backs up against what should be solid earth, according to the house's foundation layout. When I knock on the paneling myself, it sounds hollow, as if there's a space behind it, rather than the concrete foundation wall I would expect. I find a flashlight in the kitchen junk drawer and return to the basement, examining the paneling more carefully. The installation looks professional. Each panel fits snugly against its neighbors, with no gaps or loose sections that would suggest easy removal. But as I run my hands along the wall, I can feel a slight give in one section, as if the panel isn't backed by anything solid. Using a small pry bar from the workshop area, I carefully work one corner of a panel loose. The nails come out easily, and when I pull the panel away from the wall, I'm surprised to find not concrete, but another wall behind it. This one made of old brick that looks like it predates the rest of the foundation. There's a gap of about 6 inches between the paneling and the brick wall, just enough space for someone to have run wiring or plumbing, though I don't see any utilities in the narrow cavity. The brick wall extends as far as I can see with the flashlight, disappearing into darkness on both sides of the removed panel. The knocking has stopped while I work, but now I can hear something else, a faint sound that might be breathing, or the whisper of air moving through a space that should be sealed. I replace the panel temporarily, not wanting to damage the basement's finished appearance until I know more about what I'm dealing with. But that night, as I lie in bed, listening to the house settle around me, I can't stop thinking about the space behind the wall, the hollow sound of the paneling, and the rhythm of those patient knocks. Over the next few days, I do some research on the house's history. The county records show that the original structure was built in 1923, a modest 2-story home constructed during the post-war housing boom. But there are references to earlier construction on the site, a smaller dwelling dating back to the 1890s that was apparently incorporated into the foundation of the newer house. This explains the brick wall behind the paneling. The original house would have had a stone or brick foundation, and when the larger structure was built, the old foundation walls were left in place, and the new basement was constructed around them. It's not uncommon in older neighborhoods where lots were subdivided and rebuilt multiple times over the decades. But it doesn't explain the knocking. I start keeping a log of when the sounds occur, noting the time, duration, and any variations in the rhythm. The pattern is remarkably consistent, 9:30 p.m. every night, lasting 5 to 7 minutes. Always the same 3-knock sequence. Always the same measured pauses between repetitions. On the 7th night, I decide to respond. When the knocking begins, I go down to the basement and stand near the section of paneling I had loosened. I wait for a pause in the rhythm, then knock back. 3 measured raps on the panel, matching the cadence I've been hearing. the response is immediate. The knocking from behind the wall becomes more rapid, more insistent. Instead of the leisurely 3-knock pattern, I hear a series of quick taps, almost excited in their urgency. Then, gradually, the rhythm slows back to the original pattern, as if whatever is making the sound is trying to establish communication. I knock again, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. The response comes back exactly the same, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. We continue this back and forth for several minutes, and I begin to feel like I'm engaged in some form of primitive conversation. The entity behind the wall, and by now I'm thinking of it as an entity rather than a structural problem, seems capable of learning and responding to patterns. When I try a different rhythm, 2 quick knocks followed by 1 slow knock, the response mimics my pattern perfectly. When I knock continuously for 10 seconds, the response is also continuous for exactly 10 seconds. Whatever is behind that wall is listening, learning, and attempting to communicate. This should terrify me. The logical response would be to contact a contractor, have the paneling removed professionally, and discover the prosaic explanation for what I'm experiencing. Mice in the walls, settling timber, expansion joints in the old brick. There are rational explanations for everything I've heard, but I find myself looking forward to these nightly conversations. There's something comforting about the regularity, the predictable exchange of sounds in the basement's quiet atmosphere. After the chaos of divorce proceedings and the stress of relocating, the measured communication with my unseen neighbor has become a form of meditation, a few minutes of structured interaction that helps me transition from the demands of the day to the peace of evening. I start experimenting with more complex patterns, tapping out simple melodies or Morse code sequences. The responses become more sophisticated as well, as if my invisible correspondent is also learning and growing more confident in our communication. One night, I decide to speak aloud while knocking. "Hello?" I say, tapping once on the panel. "Can you hear me?" The response is a single knock. Then silence. "My name is David." I continue. "I live in the house now." 3 knocks in response. Not the usual pattern, but a clear acknowledgement. "Have you been here long?" A long series of rapid knocks, too many to count easily. If this is meant to represent duration, it suggests a very long time indeed. "Are you?" I pause, unsure how to phrase the question. "Are you okay?" The 2 knocks, definitive and somehow sad. Over the following weeks, we develop a more sophisticated communication system. 1 knock for yes, 2 for no, 3 for uncertain or complex answers that can't be reduced to simple affirmation or denial. Rapid knocking for emphasis, slow knocking for careful consideration. I learned that my correspondent has been behind the wall for a very long time, longer than the current house has existed. They. I begin thinking of the presence as they, rather than are not okay, but they're not in immediate distress. They're aware of the passage of time, aware of the changes in the house above, aware of the succession of people who have lived here before me. Most importantly, they're lonely. The realization comes gradually, through patient question and answer sessions that stretch across multiple nights. The presence behind the wall has been isolated for decades, aware of life happening beyond their reach, but unable to participate in it. Previous homeowners either never heard the knocking or dismissed it as background noise. leaving my correspondent to maintain their vigil in solitude. I'm the first person to acknowledge them, to respond to their attempts at communication, and the relief in their knocking patterns is palpable. The rhythms become more animated, more varied, as if they're finally able to express thoughts and feelings that have been building up for years. "What do you need?" I ask one evening, and the response is a complex series of knocks that I can't immediately interpret. But over the following nights, a pattern emerges in their responses. They seem to need acknowledgement, recognition, the simple confirmation that they exist, and that their existence matters to someone. The nightly conversations have become as important to them as they have to me. A mutual exchange that provides connection across the barrier of the wall. I start sharing more details about my day during our evening sessions, describing my work, my thoughts about the house, my plans for renovation and improvement. The presence listens. I can tell they're listening because the silence between their responses has a quality of attention, the way silence feels different when someone is truly hearing what you say. They respond with patterns that I'm beginning to interpret as emotional states. Quick, light taps that seem like laughter. Slow, heavy knocks that suggest sadness or contemplation. Rhythmic sequences that feel like musical appreciation when I describe a song I've heard or a book I've enjoyed. After a month of these conversations, I make a decision that surprises even me. I'm going to open the wall, not to end the communication, but to improve it. Whatever is behind that paneling has been trapped there for decades, isolated in a space that allows them to hear the world, but not participate in it. If I can create a better connection between their space and mine, perhaps we can develop a more meaningful relationship. I start by carefully removing more panels, working in the evening, after our usual conversation time, so as not to disturb our established routine. The brick wall behind the paneling extends the full length of the basement, and in some places, I can see gaps between the bricks where mortar has crumbled away over the decades. The gaps are small, but large enough to allow better sound transmission. And when I place my ear against them, I can hear something that stops my breath in my throat. Breathing. Not the whisper of air movement I had noticed before, but actual respiration, slow, measured. The rhythm of someone or something drawing breath in a space that shouldn't contain enough air to support life. "Hello?" I whisper through one of the gaps. The response is immediate and startling. Not a knock, but a voice. "Hello, David." The voice is soft, muffled by the brick barrier, but unmistakably human. Female, I think, with an accent that seems to belong to an earlier era. The carefully modulated tones of someone who learned to speak when pronunciation and grammar were more formal than they are today. "You can talk," I say, stating the obvious because I need to hear myself say it. "I can talk," she confirms. I always could talk, but no one listened before. We speak through the brick wall for hours that night, and I learn the story of the woman who has been my invisible correspondent for all these weeks. Her name is Eleanor, and she has been behind the wall since 1934, when the old house was demolished and the new foundation built around the remains of the earlier structure. She was working in the basement of the original house when the construction began, cataloging items in what had been her father's workshop, and somehow the renovation trapped her in the space between the old foundation and the new. She describes it as being caught between two versions of the same place, existing in the overlap where the old house and the new house occupy the same footprint, but not quite the same reality. She can hear everything that happens in the basement above. She has listened to decades of homeowners using the space for storage, workshops, children's playrooms, exercise equipment. But until I responded to her knocking, no one had ever acknowledged her presence or attempted to communicate. How have you survived? I ask, though I'm not sure I want to know the answer. Time works differently here, she explains. Days pass like hours, years like days. I don't age the way I should. Don't hunger or thirst the way I remember from before. It's not life as you understand it, but it's not death either. For she has been waiting, she tells me, for someone who would listen, someone who would acknowledge that the space behind the wall contains more than just emptiness. My arrival, my willingness to engage with the knocking, has changed something fundamental about her situation. Can you leave? I ask. I don't know, she says. I've never tried. This space has been my entire world for so long. I'm not sure I remember how to exist anywhere else. Over the following nights, we work together to find a solution. The brick wall, we discover, is not as solid as it appears. Decades of settling have created gaps large enough for Eleanor to move through, if she chooses. But crossing from her space into mine would mean leaving the between, place where she has existed for so long, and neither of us knows what that transition might involve. What if I can't survive in your reality? She asks during one of our conversations. What if crossing over means ending whatever form of existence I have now? What if staying means continuing to be trapped forever? I counter. You've been waiting for decades. Maybe this is what you were waiting for. The decision, ultimately, is hers to make. On a Thursday night in October, as the first frost settles on the basement windows, Eleanor makes her choice. I'm sitting on the basement floor, with my back against the brick wall, speaking through the gap, where the mortar has crumbled away, when I feel movement behind me. The sensation is subtle at first, a change in the air pressure, a shift in the quality of the silence. Then I hear footsteps, not the hollow sound of someone walking on the other side of the wall, but the solid thump of shoes on concrete, coming from behind me, from the basement proper. I turn around, and Eleanor is standing in the middle of the basement, looking around with the wonder of someone seeing a familiar place from a completely new perspective. She appears solid, real, though there's something translucent about her, as if she's not quite fully present in this space. She's dressed in clothes from the 1930s, a simple dress, practical shoes, her hair styled in the waves that were fashionable when she first became trapped behind the wall. "Hello, David?" she says, and her voice is clearer now, no longer muffled by brick and distance. "Hello, Eleanor." She walks slowly around the basement, touching the paneled walls, examining the modern fluorescent fixtures, running her fingers along the surface of the workbench where her father's tools once lay. "It's different," she says, "but familiar, like seeing a childhood home after many years away." We spend the night talking face to face for the first time, and I learn more about Eleanor's story, about the life she was living when the construction accident trapped her between realities. She had been a teacher, unmarried at 31, living with her father in the house he had built with his own hands. When he died, and the property was sold for development, she had been sorting through his possessions, trying to decide what to save and what to let go. "I never got to finish," she says. "There were so many things I wanted to preserve, so many memories I hadn't properly catalogued." "Maybe that's why you stayed," I suggest. "Maybe you were waiting for someone to help you finish the work." Over the following weeks, Eleanor and I worked together to complete the task she had begun so many decades ago. Though her father's possessions are long gone, she remembers each item, and I help her create a written record of the workshop, the tools, the projects he had been working on when he died. It's therapeutic work for both of us. Eleanor finally gets to complete her interrupted task, and I gain a deeper understanding of the house's history, the lives that have been lived within these walls. We're both dealing with loss in our own ways. Her loss of the life she might have lived, my loss of the marriage that had defined my adult years until recently. As autumn deepens into winter, Eleanor becomes more solid, more present in the physical world. She can now touch objects and move them, can turn lights on and off, can even prepare simple meals in the kitchen upstairs. But she still fades sometimes, especially during daylight hours, becoming translucent and distant until evening brings her back into full focus. "I think I'm transitioning," she explains during one of our evening conversations. "Moving fully from the between, place into your reality. But it's a gradual process, like learning to exist all over again." "Are you happy about that?" I ask. "Yes," she says without hesitation. "I've been waiting so long to live again, to be part of the world instead of just observing it. But it's also frightening. I've been safe behind the wall, even if I was lonely. Out here, anything could happen. Anything could happen behind the wall, too," I point out. "At least out here, you're not facing it alone." A spring arrives, and with it, Eleanor's full transition into the physical world. She no longer fades during daylight hours, no longer seems translucent or distant. To all appearances, she's a woman who lives in my house, who shares my meals and my conversations and my quiet evening routines. The legal complications of her existence, the fact that she has no social security number, no birth certificate accessible through modern records, no way to prove her identity to bureaucratic systems, require creative solutions and the help of a lawyer who specializes in unusual cases. But these are manageable problems, the kind that can be solved with patience and proper documentation. The basement no longer echoes with knocking sounds. The space behind the wall has returned to simple emptiness, the way it was probably meant to be when the house was first constructed. But sometimes, late at night, I can hear something else coming from that direction. Not knocking, but a sound like contentment, as if the space itself is satisfied with the resolution we've found. Eleanor has become more than a rescued spirit or a mysterious correspondent. She's become a companion, someone who shares the house's history and appreciates its quirks, someone who understands the value of quiet evenings and patient conversation. We're both starting over, both learning how to live in new circumstances, and we're doing it together. The house feels complete now in a way it never did when I lived here alone. Every room has its purpose. Every corner has its story. And the basement has been transformed from a utilitarian space into something like a memorial, not to the dead, but to the persistence of connection across time and barriers. Sometimes visitors comment on the knocking, sounds they hear from downstairs, the rhythmic tapping that seems to come from behind the walls. Eleanor and I just smile and explain that old houses make all sorts of sounds, that the plumbing and heating systems have their own language, that you learn to ignore these minor acoustical quirks when you've lived somewhere long enough. But privately, we know better. The knocking continues, because there are others still waiting behind other walls, in other between places, hoping that someone will listen and respond with the patience that connection requires. The sounds are fainter now, coming from different areas of the basement, different sections of the old foundation that still hold spaces between what was and what is. Eleanor hears them too, and sometimes in the evening, she'll place her hand against the brick wall and whisper words of encouragement to whoever might be listening on the other side. We're here. She tells them, "We know you're there. When you're ready, we'll help you find your way out." Not all of them are ready, she explains to me. Some have been in there between, places so long that they've forgotten what it means to exist in linear time, in a world where cause precedes effect and choices have permanent consequences. They need more time to remember, more patience to rebuild the courage that isolation has eroded. But they know now that someone is listening. They know that the knocking is heard, that the rhythm of their persistence has meaning to someone in the world beyond the walls. And that knowledge, Eleanor tells me, makes their waiting more bearable, gives them hope that their isolation has an endpoint rather than stretching into infinity. How many are there? I ask during one of our late night conversations, as we sit in the basement listening to the soft percussion of distant knocking coming from multiple directions. "I don't know," she admits. "I could hear some of them when I was behind the wall, but not all. The between places don't always connect to each other. Some of them have been alone for so long they've stopped trying to communicate. But they're still there. They're still there, waiting for someone to notice that the spaces between spaces aren't empty, that the gaps in construction and renovation and time itself sometimes trap things that need to be found. We've decided to stay in the house, Eleanor and I, not just because of the legal complications of her situation, or because we've both grown comfortable with this space and its rhythms. We're staying because the house needs us, because it has become a kind of way station for the lost and trapped, and someone needs to maintain the listening post that we've established in the basement. During the day, we live normal lives. Eleanor has found work at the local library, her teaching background, and her encyclopedic knowledge of local history, making her invaluable to the research department. I continue my job in tech support, fixing other people's computer problems with the patients I've developed through months of learning to decode knocking patterns and brick wall communications. But in the evenings, we return to our real work, sitting in the basement, listening to the walls, responding to the patient percussion of entities who need to know that someone acknowledges their existence. We've installed more comfortable seating down there, a small space heater for the winter months, even a mini refrigerator stocked with snacks for the long listening sessions. Some nights, the knocking is barely audible, just a whisper of contact from someone or something that barely remembers how to reach across the barrier between their space and hours. Other nights, the sounds are more insistent, more complex, as if multiple entities are trying to communicate simultaneously from different sections of the foundation. We're learning to distinguish between different types of knocking, different rhythms that suggest different needs and different readiness levels. Some of the trapped entities seem content to simply exchange patterns, to engage in the basic call and response that confirms their existence without seeking anything more complex. Others seem to be building towards something, developing more sophisticated communication skills, working up the courage to attempt the transition that Eleanor made. How long will this take? I asked Eleanor once, during a particularly active evening when knocking seemed to emanate from every wall in the basement. As long as it takes, she replied. Some of them have been waiting since the house was first built. Others might have become trapped during renovations in the 50s or 70s or 90s. Time doesn't work the same way in the between places, so their experience of waiting might be completely different from ours. And we just keep listening forever. We keep listening until everyone who wants to cross over has had the chance to try. And then we keep listening in case someone new gets trapped, or in case someone who wasn't ready before decides they want to attempt the transition. It's a strange life purpose, being the custodians of a supernatural halfway house, the operators of a rescue service for entities trapped in architectural limbo. But it suits us both. Eleanor gets to continue her interrupted work of cataloging and preserving things that might otherwise be lost. I get to use my problem-solving skills on challenges that are more meaningful than software glitches and network connectivity issues. And we both get the satisfaction of knowing that we're providing connection to beings who had given up hope of ever being acknowledged again. The house has changed around us as we've settled into this routine. The basement feels larger now, as if responding to its new purpose by expanding the space available for our listening sessions. The acoustics have improved too. We can hear more subtle variations in the knocking patterns, can distinguish between entities who might be only a few feet away from each other behind different sections of wall. Sometimes, late at night, when the knocking is particularly active, Eleanor and I will split up, each taking a different wall to monitor, coordinating our responses to create more complex communication patterns. We've developed a system of hand signals that allows us to synchronize our knocking without verbal communication that might interfere with the delicate process of making contact. We're not the only ones doing this work. Eleanor has discovered, through her research at the library, she's found references to similar phenomena in other old buildings throughout the city, places where renovation and construction have created between spaces, where patient entities wait behind walls and under floors, and in the gaps between official blueprints and actual architecture. There's a network, she explains. He's showing me newspaper clippings and historical records that reference unexplained sounds in various buildings. Other listening posts, other people who've learned to respond to the knocking. We're part of something larger. The idea that we're part of a city-wide rescue operation for architecturally displaced entities is both comforting and overwhelming. Comforting, because it means we're not alone in this strange work. Overwhelming, because it suggests the scope of the problem is much larger than just our basement, but we can only handle our own section of the network, our own collection of trapped entities who need someone to acknowledge their existence and help them find their way back to linear time and physical space. The work is slow, patient, requiring the kind of dedication that builds over months and years rather than days and weeks. Last month, we had our second successful transition. The entity had been knocking from behind the north wall for several weeks, developing increasingly sophisticated communication patterns that suggested readiness to attempt the crossing. Unlike Eleanor's gradual materialization, this transition happened quickly. One moment, there was knocking from behind the wall. The next moment, a young man in work clothes from the 1950s was standing in the middle of the basement, looking around with the disorientation of someone waking from a very long dream. "Where am I?" he asked, and Eleanor and I spent the evening helping him understand what had happened, how long he had been trapped, what the world looked like in the 21st century. His name was Robert, and he had been working on electrical installation when a renovation project in 1953 had somehow displaced him into the between space. Like Eleanor, he had been aware of time passing, but had experienced it differently, watching decades of changes in the house without being able to participate in them. The legal complications of helping someone reintegrate into society after a 70-year absence are complex, but we're learning to navigate them with the help of our lawyer and Eleanor's connections at the library. Robert is staying with us temporarily while we work out the documentation issues and help him adapt to modern life. He's also helping with the listening sessions, adding his own perspective to our understanding of how the between spaces work and how to communicate with the entities still trapped behind other walls. His transition seems to have encouraged some of the others. The knocking has become more frequent and more varied since his crossing. They see that it's possible. Eleanor explains, seeing Robert make the transition successfully gives them hope that they can do it too. We've had to expand our operation to accommodate the increased activity. The basement now has multiple listening stations, comfortable chairs, positioned near different sections of wall where we can maintain ongoing communication with various entities. We've also installed a sound system that allows us to play music or recorded conversations that might help the trapped entities remember what it feels like to exist in shared space with other people. The work is becoming more complex as we learn more about the different types of between spaces and the different needs of the entities trapped within them. Some require only acknowledgement and patience. Others need more active assistance, complex communication sequences that help them remember how to exist in linear time. A few seem to need emotional support, reassurance that crossing over is safe, and that they won't lose their essential selves in the transition. But the work is also becoming more rewarding as we see the results of our patience and dedication. Each successful transition validates the importance of what we're doing, confirms that the strange purpose we've discovered is genuinely meaningful, rather than just an elaborate fantasy. Eleanor and I have become partners in every sense of the word, not just romantic partners, though that has developed naturally over our months of shared purpose, but working partners, collaborators in a project that requires both of our skills and perspectives. She brings historical knowledge and an understanding of what it feels like to be trapped between realities. I bring technical problem-solving abilities and the patience that comes from years of debugging complex systems. Together, we've created something that neither of us could have accomplished alone. A functional rescue operation for entities that official reality doesn't acknowledge exist. The house settles around us each evening as we take our positions at the listening stations, be preparing for another night of patient communication with the trapped and forgotten. The knocking begins as the sun sets, soft at first, then building to the complex percussion of multiple entities, trying to make contact across the barriers that separate there between. Spaces from our shared reality. We knock back, establishing the rhythms of connection and acknowledgement that let them know they haven't been forgotten, that someone is listening, that help is available when they're ready to accept it. Outside, the city goes about its normal business, unaware of the parallel rescue operation happening in basements and between walls throughout its neighborhoods. But down here, in the space between spaces, we maintain our vigil, keeping the communication lines open for anyone who needs to find their way home from the places where time forgot to look for them. The work continues, patient and persistent as the knocking itself, helping the lost find their way back to the world. One carefully orchestrated transition at a time. Story 2. The rain taps against my bedroom window in an endless rhythm, each droplet a tiny percussion against the glass. Sarah lies beside me, her breathing soft and even, the kind of peaceful sleep I used to envy. Used to. Now I find myself watching her, studying the gentle rise and fall of her chest, the way her fingers curl slightly in dreams. It started 3 weeks ago. Such a small thing, really. The kind of detail most people would never notice, would dismiss as imagination or fatigue. But I notice everything about Sarah. The way she hums when she cooks. How she always touches door frames when walking through them. The particular cadence of her laugh when she's genuinely amused versus when she's just being polite. And now, the way she blinks. The digital clock casts its red numbers across the ceiling, 2:47 a.m. I should be sleeping, but sleep feels impossible when your mind keeps circling back to something that shouldn't matter, something that can't be real. Yet every time I close my eyes, I see it again, that moment this afternoon when she looked up from her book and blinked at me. Her eyelids had closed from the bottom up, not the normal, natural downward sweep that every human makes countless times each day. Instead, her lower lids had risen to meet the upper ones, like window shades being pulled up from below. For just an instant, maybe half a second, but long enough for my brain to register the wrongness of it. Long enough to feel that cold finger of unease trace down my spine. I told myself I was seeing things. The light from the window was strange that afternoon, casting odd shadows across her face. I'd been working long hours, surviving on too little sleep and too much caffeine. The mind plays tricks when it's exhausted. Everyone knows that. But then it happened again during dinner. We were at Romano's, our usual Friday night spot. Sarah was telling me about her day at the clinic, something about a difficult patient who'd finally made a breakthrough. Her eyes were bright with satisfaction, animated in that way that makes me fall in love with her all over again. She reached for her water glass, and as she lifted it to her lips, she blinked, bottom to top. That unnatural upward sweep of her lower lids. I felt the fork slip from my fingers, clattering against my plate loud enough to make the couple at the next table glance over. Sarah didn't seem to notice. She just sipped her water and continued talking about Mrs. Henderson's progress with her anxiety disorder. Normal. Everything perfectly, completely normal except for that one impossible detail. "Are you feeling all right?" she'd asked, reaching across to touch my forehead. "You look pale." Her skin was warm against mine, familiar and comforting. I wanted to ask her about the blinking, but how do you phrase such a question? How do you tell someone you love that they're performing one of the most basic human functions incorrectly? Instead, I smiled and blamed it on work stress. Let her order me the chocolate dessert I didn't want, because she thought it would make me feel better. Now, lying here in the dark beside her, I listened to the subtle sounds of her sleeping, the whisper of breath through her nose, the faint rustle of fabric as she shifts position, the almost inaudible sound of her eyelids moving against her eyes beneath them. Even in sleep, do they move wrong? Do they flutter upward when dreams dance behind them? I turn onto my side to face her, studying her profile in the dim light filtering through the curtains. She's beautiful, has always been beautiful, with those high cheekbones and the small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood accident she told me about on our third date. Everything about her face is exactly as it should be, exactly as I've memorized over the past 2 years, except when she blinks. The thought is ridiculous. I know it's ridiculous. People don't just suddenly start blinking wrong. It's not something that changes, not something that can be different from one day to the next. It's like breathing or swallowing, automatic, unconscious, unchanged since birth. Yet I can't shake the image from this afternoon, or the memory of that wrongness I felt in the restaurant. Sarah's eyes flutter beneath her lids, and I wonder what she's dreaming about. Does she know, somehow, that I'm watching her? Can she sense my growing unease even in sleep? Her breathing changes slightly, becomes less deep, and I realize she's beginning to wake. The transition from sleep to consciousness is always gradual with her, a slow surfacing that takes several minutes. Her eyes open. In the dim light, I can't be certain, but something about the movement seems wrong. Not dramatically so, not obviously so, but wrong nonetheless. Like watching a film played backwards, or hearing a familiar song in a minor key. The wrongness is subtle, but unmistakable once you know to look for it. "Hey," she whispers, her voice thick with sleep. "Can't sleep. Just thinking." I murmur back, trying to keep my voice normal. "Sorry if I woke you." She reaches out and touches my cheek, her thumb tracing along my jawline. What kind of thinking? Good thinking or worry thinking? A little of both, I guess. She blinks again, and this time I'm watching for it, waiting for it. The movement is so quick, so automatic, that I almost miss it. Almost. But there it is again, that upward sweep, like she's some sort of beautiful, impossible machine, mimicking human responses without quite getting them right. "Want to talk about it?" she asks, and her concern sounds genuine. It feels genuine. Everything about her feels genuine, except for this one small, persistent wrongness. "It's nothing important," I say, because what else can I say? That I think the woman I love has forgotten how to blink properly. That I'm lying awake cataloging the micro, expressions of someone whose face I know better than my own, that I'm starting to question not just what I'm seeing, but my own sanity. She studies my face for a moment, and I can feel her gaze like a physical weight. When she blinks, I force myself to look away, to focus on the wall behind her instead. I can't keep watching, can't keep analyzing every small gesture and movement. It's driving me toward something I don't want to name. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" she says softly. "Whatever it is that's bothering you, we can work through it together." The kindness in her voice makes my chest tight. This is Sarah, my Sarah, the woman who brings me coffee in bed every Sunday morning, who leaves little notes in my lunch bag, who cried harder than I did when my father died, the woman who knows exactly how I like my eggs and never fails to kiss me goodbye, even when we're running late. Whatever I think I'm seeing, whatever wrongness my tired mind is manufacturing, it doesn't change who she is. I know. I tell her, and I mean it. "I love you. I love you too," she replies, leaning in to kiss my forehead. Her lips are warm and soft, exactly as they should be, exactly as they always are. She settles back against her pillow, and within minutes her breathing deepens again. Sleep comes easily to her, always has. I envy that ability to simply close her eyes and drift away, to trust in the darkness and the quiet of the night. But I can't close my eyes. Not yet, because now I'm thinking about other things, other small details that might be wrong in ways I haven't noticed yet. The way she walks, perhaps, or how she holds her fork, the rhythm of her speech, or the angle of her smile. Once you start looking for wrongness, how do you stop? How do you trust your own perceptions when they keep insisting that something fundamental has changed? The clock reads 3:23 a.m. now, and the rain has stopped. In the sudden silence, I can hear my own heartbeat, feel the blood moving through my veins. Real sensations, provable physical reality. I focus on these things, the weight of my body against the mattress, the texture of the sheets against my skin, the sound of my own breathing. Sarah shifts beside me, and I hear the soft whisper of her eyelids moving. Even in sleep, the sound seems wrong somehow, too deliberate, too conscious, like she's not really sleeping at all, just pretending, just waiting for me to drift off, so she can open those eyes and blink in whatever way. She truly blinks when she thinks no one is watching. But that's madness, isn't it? The kind of paranoid thinking that comes from too little sleep and too much worry. Sarah is Sarah. She blinks the way she's always blinked, the way everyone blinks, the way human beings have blinked since the beginning of time. Anything else is just my imagination, just the stressed mind creating problems where none exist. I close my eyes and try to match my breathing to hers, try to let the rhythm lull me toward sleep. But behind my lids, I keep seeing it, that upward sweep, that wrongness that my rational mind insists cannot be real. And I find myself wondering, if someone you love starts doing something impossible, something that violates the basic rules of how bodies work, do you trust what you see, or do you trust what you know? The answer should be obvious. But lying here in the dark, listening to the woman beside me breathe, I'm no longer certain which category trust belongs in, or whether the distinction matters when morning comes, and she opens those eyes again, blinking in whatever way she blinks, wrong or right, or something in between. that my mind hasn't learned to categorize yet. Tomorrow I'll watch more carefully. Tomorrow I'll know for certain. Or tomorrow I'll realize I've been seeing things that aren't there, creating mysteries where only love should exist. Either way, tomorrow will come, and with it, the need to choose between what I see and what I believe, between the evidence of my senses and the faith I have in the impossible consistency of the everyday world. For now, I listen to Sarah sleep and wonder which choice will let me sleep beside her peacefully, and which will keep me awake forever, counting the wrong movements of the woman I love in the dark. Story 3. The moving boxes sit in my living room like accusatory monuments to poor life choices. 3 months since I bought this house. 3 months since I left the city for what the realtor called country living at its finest. And I'm still surrounded by sealed cardboard containers and the lingering smell of packing tape. The isolation was supposed to be therapeutic, a chance to write without distractions, to find some kind of peace in the simplicity of rural life. Instead, I find myself drawn to the window every evening, looking out at the mound. It rises from the back field like a question mark against the horizon, maybe 30 feet across and 8 feet high at its peak. Not quite large enough to be impressive, not quite small enough to ignore. The previous owner, Mrs. Henley, never mentioned it when we walked the property. She talked about the well water and the septic system, pointed out the apple trees and the good drainage, but never once acknowledged the grass, covered hill that dominates the view from my kitchen window. I asked about it during the final walkthrough. "Oh, that old thing," she'd said, her voice carrying a dismissive note that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Been there since before my time. Kids used to play on it, but they don't anymore. Soil's good for growing, though. Gets plenty of sun." Now, unpacking my coffee mugs 3 months later, I understand why she glossed over it. There's something unsettling about the mound, something that makes you want to look away, even as you find yourself staring. It's perfectly symmetrical, too perfectly round to be entirely natural, yet too organic, looking to be man-made. The grass grows thicker there than anywhere else in the field, a deep, almost unnatural green that seems to glow in certain light. But it's not the appearance that bothers me. It's what happened 2 weeks ago, on the night of the thunderstorm. I'd been working late, pecking away at a story that refused to come together when the power went out. The storm had been building all evening, the kind of slow, rolling thunder that starts as a whisper on the horizon and gradually grows into something that shakes the windows. I lit candles and continued writing by hand, enjoying the romantic notion of creating by candlelight like some 19th century author. Around midnight, the lightning began in earnest. Not the quick flashes you see in the city, filtered through buildings and streetlights, but raw, primal bolts that turned night to day for split seconds at a time. I abandoned my writing and stood at the window, watching nature's light show, paint the field in stark black and white. That's when I saw the fire. It erupted from the top of the mound like a pillar, a column of flame that stretched impossibly high into the storm, dark sky. Not the flickering orange of normal fire, but something cleaner, whiter, with edges so sharp they seemed to cut through the air itself. For maybe 3 seconds, no more. It burned against the night like a beacon, bright enough to illuminate every blade of grass for hundreds of yards in every direction. Then it was gone, leaving only after images dancing behind my eyelids and the ordinary darkness of a power outage. I stood there for another hour, waiting for it to return, but saw nothing except lightning and rain. When the power came back on around 2 a.m., I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Lightning can create optical illusions, especially when you're tired and staring into darkness. The mind fills in gaps, creates patterns where none exist. Everyone knows that. But the next morning, I walked out to investigate. The mound looked exactly as it always had. Thick grass, gentle slopes, that too, perfect circular shape. I climbed to the top, expecting to find scorch marks or some sign of disturbance, but there was nothing. The grass wasn't even bent. No ash, no smell of burning, no indication that anything unusual had occurred. If not for the vivid memory burning in my mind, I would have believed nothing had happened. I spent an hour examining every inch of the hill, running my hands through the grass, pressing my face close to the earth to smell for traces of smoke. Nothing. The soil felt normal beneath my fingers, cool and slightly damp from the previous night's rain. The grass had that fresh, clean scent that comes after storms. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for the feeling. Standing on top of the mound, I felt something I couldn't name. Not exactly unease, not quite fear, but a sense of expectation. Like standing on a stage before the curtain rises, or in a church during the quiet moment before prayers begin. The feeling that something was supposed to happen, something significant, but I didn't know what, or when or why I should care. I've been back 17 times since then. I don't plan these visits. I don't wake up thinking, today I'll go examine the mysterious mound in my backfield. It happens more naturally than that. I'll be washing dishes and find myself looking out the window. I'll be reading and realize I've been staring at the same paragraph for 10 minutes because my attention has drifted to the view outside. Before I know it, I'm walking across the field, drawn by something I can't articulate. Each visit is the same. I circle the base, looking for any sign of change or disturbance. I climb to the top and stand there, waiting for that feeling to intensify or resolve into something I can understand. I run my hands through the grass, press my ear to the ground, even taste the earth once, because I read somewhere that burned soil has a distinctive flavor. Nothing. Always nothing. Yet the compulsion to return grows stronger each day. Yesterday, I drove into town to ask questions. The librarian, Mrs. Foster, has lived here for 40 years and knows everything about local history. I asked about the land where my house sits, mentioned the mound in casual terms, watching her face for any flicker of recognition or concern. "Oh, you bought the old Henley place," she said, smiling. "Beautiful property. Good water, good soil. Though I suppose you've noticed the hill out back." The way she said "hill" made my skin prickle. Not mound, not rise, not the dozen other words she could have chosen. Hill, with just enough emphasis to suggest she was being deliberately neutral. "What do you know about it?" I asked. Her smile faltered slightly. "Well, it's been there as long as anyone remembers. Some say it's an old burial mound, but there's no record of any Native American settlements in this area. Others think it might be a natural formation, though the shape is awfully regular for something nature made. Has anyone ever dug into it? Investigated?" "Oh, I couldn't say. That would be private property, wouldn't it? The Henleys owned that land for 3 generations. If they wanted to dig, that would have been their business. But her eyes suggested there was more to the story. The kind of more that small towns keep to themselves, passed down in whispers and meaningful looks rather than official records. I tried the diner next. Coffee and pie, casual conversation with the locals, the kind of information gathering that feels like socializing. Most people knew about the mound, but had nothing interesting to say about it. Just part of the landscape, like the creek that runs along the property line or the stand of oak trees near the road. But then I mentioned the fire. I phrased it carefully, hypothetically, asked if anyone had ever seen strange lights in that area, maybe during storms or other unusual weather. The conversation stopped. Not dramatically, no one gasped or dropped their coffee cup, but the easy chatter simply ceased, replaced by the kind of careful silence that follows an uncomfortable question. Lights. Asked Tom Morrison, who owns the feed store. What kind of lights? I don't know. Just lights. Maybe fire. During the storm 2 weeks ago. The silence stretched longer. People found reasons to look at their watches, finish their coffee, remember appointments they'd forgotten. Within 5 minutes, I was sitting alone at the counter, wondering what exactly I'd said wrong. Tonight, I'm back at my window, watching the mound in the fading light. The sun sets behind it, creating a silhouette that looks almost architectural in its precision. Too perfect, too deliberate, like someone designed it for exactly this view, positioned it to catch the light in exactly this way. The boxes around me remain unpacked. I tell myself I'll get to them tomorrow, but I know I won't. They're not important anymore. Nothing feels important except the mound and the question it represents. What burns with perfect fire, but leaves no trace? What draws people to it generation after generation without revealing its secrets? I've started dreaming about it. Not nightmares exactly, but dreams filled with that same sense of expectation I feel when standing on its peak. In the dreams, I'm always walking toward it, but the distance never decreases. I can see it clearly, can count the blades of grass on its surface. But no matter how long I walk, it remains just out of reach. The strangest part is that in the dreams, I'm not alone. There are others walking beside me, behind me, ahead of me. People I don't recognize but somehow know. They don't speak, don't acknowledge my presence. Just walk with the same steady determination toward the same impossible destination. When I wake, I can feel their presence lingering, not in the room with me, but somewhere nearby, waiting, patient, like they know something I don't, like they're ahead of me in some cosmic queue, and my time will come eventually. The rational part of my mind knows this is all nonsense. Stress from the move, isolation playing tricks with my perception, the natural human tendency to create meaning where none exists. There's no mysterious fire, no ancient secrets, no supernatural significance to a hill in a field behind my house. It's just earth and grass and my overactive imagination. But rationality feels thin these days, insufficient to explain the pull I feel every time I look out the window. It doesn't account for the way my heart rate increases when clouds gather, or how I find myself checking the weather forecast for thunderstorms with an anticipation that feels almost hungry. Tomorrow marks 3 weeks since I saw the fire. 3 weeks of visits and questions and dreams that feel more real than waking life. Part of me hopes for another storm, another chance to see that perfect white column rising into the darkness. Part of me fears it more than anything I've ever feared, because if I see it again, I'll know I'm not imagining things. I'll know there's something genuinely impossible happening in my backyard, something that challenges everything I understand about how the world works. And if I don't see it again, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I'm losing my mind. Either way, I suspect I'll keep walking out to the mound, keep standing on its peak, keep waiting for something to happen that will finally make sense of the expectation that grows stronger with each passing day. The unpacked boxes can wait. The story I came here to write can wait. Everything can wait except the need to understand what burns without trace, what calls without voice, what waits without revealing what it's waiting for. Tonight, I'll watch the sky and hope for storms. Story 4. The blue light of my laptop screen casts everything in my apartment into shades of shadow and artificial day. It's 1:47 a.m., according to the clock in the corner, but time has become negotiable lately. Sleep arrives when it arrives, usually around dawn, and consciousness begins whenever my phone buzzes with the first email of the day. Working from home has its advantages, but maintaining a normal schedule isn't one of them. I'm scrolling through Reddit, that familiar late night ritual of consuming other people's thoughts and experiences. The algorithm knows me well by now, feeding me an endless stream of carefully curated content designed to hold attention. Horror stories, mostly. Real ones, supposedly. People sharing their strange encounters, their unexplainable experiences, their moments when reality bent just enough to let something else peek through. Tonight's selection is particularly engaging. A post from someone claiming their reflection occasionally moves independently. Another describing a phone that receives calls from numbers that don't exist. The usual catalogue of small impossibilities that make perfect sense at 2 in the morning, but feel silly in daylight. I'm about to close the laptop when I hear it. A voice. Soft, barely audible, but definitely present. Someone reading aloud. The words I'm seeing on my screen spoken in a whisper that seems to come from just behind my left shoulder. The strangest part wasn't the message itself, but the fact that I recognized the handwriting. It was mine, definitely mine, but I couldn't remember writing it. The paper felt warm to the touch, like it had been sitting in sunlight, even though I found it in my dark basement at 3 in the morning. I freeze, my finger hovering over the trackpad. The voice continues, matching the words on my screen with perfect synchronization, speaking in a tone that suggests intimate familiarity with the content. Not reading exactly, more like reciting something memorized, something rehearsed until it flows as naturally as conversation. I spin in my chair, searching the apartment behind me. The living room is empty, bathed in the same blue glow from my screen. The kitchen beyond lies in darkness. Nothing moves except the curtains stirring in the draft from my poorly sealed windows. But the voice continues. I tried to show it to my roommate, but when I went back to get it, the paper was blank. Just empty white space where the words had been minutes before. She looked at me, like I was having some kind of breakdown, and maybe I was. Maybe I still am. My heart is doing something irregular in my chest. A stuttering rhythm, that makes me press my palm flat against my ribs. The voice is so close, I should be able to feel breath against my neck. But there's nothing. Just words floating in the air behind me, spoken by someone who clearly isn't there. I minimize the browser window, cutting the story short mid-sentence. The voice stops immediately, leaving only the hum of my laptop's fan and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. For a moment, I convince myself I imagined it. Auditory hallucinations from too much caffeine and too little sleep. The mind playing tricks when overtired, creating patterns where none exist. But then I maximize the window again, and the voice resumes exactly where it left off. The worst part is that I keep going back to check. Every morning, every night. Part of me hoping the words will be there again. Part of me terrified they will be. Because if they come back, what else might I have written that I don't remember? What else might be waiting for me to find it? I slam the laptop shut, and the silence that follows feels thick and expectant. My apartment has never seemed smaller, the walls pressing closer in the sudden darkness. I sit there for several minutes, listening to my own breathing, trying to convince myself that what I just experienced has a rational explanation. Neighbor's television, maybe. Sound traveling through the thin walls of my building in strange ways. Or a video playing on someone else's device. The audio somehow syncing with my reading by pure coincidence. These things happen. The brain is designed to find patterns, even when they don't actually exist. But even as I form these explanations, I know they're inadequate. The voice was too clear, too precise, too perfectly timed to be accidental. And there was something familiar about it, something that made my skin crawl with recognition, even as I insisted I'd never heard it before. I open the laptop again. The browser window is still there, the story still displayed, waiting. I scroll up to the beginning and start reading silently, internally daring the voice to return. Nothing happens for the first few paragraphs. Just me reading alone in my apartment, the way it should be, the way it always has been. But as I reach the part where I'd first heard the whisper, my scalp begins to tingle with anticipation. And then, right on cue, the voice begins again. The strangest part wasn't the message itself, but the fact that I recognized the handwriting. This time, I force myself to remain still, to listen carefully, analytically, like I'm conducting an experiment. The voice is definitely male, probably middle-aged, with a slight accent I can't place. There's an intimacy to the delivery, like someone sharing a secret with a trusted friend. The pacing is deliberate, each word given weight and consideration. Most unsettling of all, there's genuine emotion in the reading. Fear when describing frightening moments, confusion during the uncertain passages, relief when the narrator finds temporary safety. Whoever is reading these words understands them, connects with them, experiences them as more than just text on a screen. I continue scrolling, and the voice follows faithfully. Every word, every punctuation mark acknowledged and interpreted. When I pause, the voice pauses. When I skip ahead, the voice jumps with me, never missing a beat, never losing synchronization. This continues for 20 minutes. 20 minutes of shared reading, of parallel experience, of someone who isn't there, accompanying me through stories of impossible things happening to ordinary people. Part of me begins to find it comforting, like having a reading companion, someone to share the experience of these late, night glimpses into other people's inexplicable moments. But comfort turns to unease when I realize something else. The voice isn't just reading the stories I'm looking at. It's also narrating my actions. He scrolls down to the next post. This one about a woman whose shadow started moving independently. The author claims it began small, just a slight delay when she raised her hand, a subtle lag when she turned her head. But gradually, the shadow became more assertive, more autonomous. I look over my shoulder again, but of course there's no one there. The voice continues, describing not just the story on my screen, but my reaction to it, my body language, my growing discomfort. Huz beginning to understand that this isn't just someone reading along with him. This is someone watching him, noting his responses, cataloging his fears. The realization makes his breathing shallow, makes him want to close the laptop and retreat to his bedroom. But he doesn't. He keeps reading because he needs to know more. The accuracy is what terrifies me most. I am thinking about closing the laptop. I am considering retreat. My breathing has become shallow, and there's a tightness in my chest that suggests panic is close to the surface. How can a voice that shouldn't exist know me so well, predict my responses with such precision? Hayes wondering how long this has been happening. Has someone been reading along with him every night, sharing his browsing habits, his late night curiosities? Or is this the first time? A break in the usual pattern. That means something significant is beginning. That question hits me like cold water. How long has this been happening? I've been reading Reddit stories for months, years even. Have I been accompanied this entire time? Just too distracted to notice. The thought makes me nauseous. The idea that my privacy has been compromised in such an intimate way, that my solitary moments haven't been solitary at all. I click on a different story, hoping to break whatever connection has formed between the voice and my screen. This one is about a man who receives emails from his future self, warnings about decisions he hasn't made yet. As I begin reading, the voice adapts immediately, shifting from narrating my experience to reading the new content. The first email arrived on a Tuesday. The subject line read, "Don't take the job at Morrison and Associates." I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But something about the sender's address stopped me. It was my own email, but with a timestamp 3 years in the future. I try clicking rapidly between different posts, hoping to confuse or overwhelm whatever system is producing this effect. But the voice keeps pace effortlessly, switching between stories without pause or confusion. A tale about disappearing photograph blends seamlessly into one about a music box that plays different melodies for different people. The voice maintains perfect continuity, as if all these separate stories are part of one larger narrative it's been preparing to tell. Is testing now, trying to break the pattern, trying to find the limits of what's happening to him. But there are no limits. There's only the voice and the stories, and the growing realization that he's become part of something larger than his late night reading habit. My hands are shaking now, actually trembling as I grip the laptop. The voice has become more personal, more direct, speaking about me with the casual familiarity of an old friend. But worse than the intimacy is the certainty in its tone, the suggestion that what's happening to me is inevitable, expected, part of some predetermined sequence of events. I want to close the laptop, to end this experience, and return to the safety of silence. But I also need to understand what's happening. Need to know if this is temporary madness or something more persistent. The stories I've been reading are full of people who ignored the strange things happening to them, who dismissed the impossible and lived to regret it. He knows he should stop reading, should break the connection while he still can. But curiosity is stronger than caution, and he's beginning to suspect that stopping won't actually end anything. The voice will continue whether he's listening or not. The stories will be told whether he's there to hear them or not. His participation is voluntary, but his involvement is permanent. The word permanent echoes in my mind like a verdict. I think about all the people who've shared their stories on these forums, all the individuals who've experienced impossible things and felt compelled to tell someone, anyone, about their encounters with the inexplicable. Are they all being read to? Are their words being spoken by invisible voices to audiences they'll never know about? Or am I special somehow? The recipient of personal attention from whatever force generates these whispered narrations. The thought should be flattering, but it feels more like being selected for something I don't understand, inducted into a club I never wanted to join. He's realizing that the stories he's been reading aren't just entertainment, they're preparation. Examples of how ordinary people respond when reality becomes flexible. Case studies in adaptation, in accepting the impossible, in learning to live with changed circumstances. I close my eyes, but the voice continues, describing stories that are no longer visible on my screen. It's moved beyond synchronization now, beyond the pretense of reading along with my browsing. Instead, it's telling me things directly, sharing information I haven't sought, but somehow need to know. The process began weeks ago, though he didn't notice at first. A whispered word here, a half-heard sentence there. Background noise that his conscious mind dismissed, but his subconscious catalogued and preserved. Tonight is just the first time he's been paying enough attention to recognize what's been happening all along, weeks ago. The voice claims to have been present for weeks, speaking words I didn't realize I was hearing. I try to remember recent dreams, recent moments of distraction or unease. Have there been signs I ignored? Symptoms I attributed to stress or insomnia? I open my eyes and look at the screen again. The current story is about a woman whose house gradually fills with voices from previous occupants, layering conversations from different eras until she can't distinguish past from present. As I read, I wonder if my apartment is filling with voices too, if this single whisper is just the beginning of a much larger chorus. He's wondering what comes next, whether this is an isolated incident or the first movement of something larger, whether he's going crazy or going sane in a world that's crazier than he ever imagined. The answer, as with most important questions, depends entirely on how carefully he's been listening. The voice fades as it speaks this last sentence, becoming quieter and more distant until it's barely audible above the hum of my laptop's fan. For a moment, I think it's ending, that whatever has been happening is finally concluding. But then I hear it again, soft and persistent, beginning a new story from somewhere else on the screen. And I realize that nothing has ended at all. This is just how things are now. This is my new reality. The voice settles into a comfortable rhythm, reading story after story with the patience of someone who has all the time in the world. I find myself relaxing despite my fear, letting the whispered words wash over me like a bedtime story told by an invisible parent. There's something hypnotic about the experience, something that makes my eyelids heavy, even as my mind races with questions. I don't remember closing the laptop. I don't remember walking to my bedroom or pulling the covers over my shoulders. But somehow I'm lying in the dark now, listening to that familiar whisper continue its reading, even though no screen illuminates the room. The voice has followed me, or perhaps I've carried it with me, internalized it, until it no longer needs an external source. He dreams now of voices in empty rooms, of words spoken by no one and heard by everyone. In his dreams, he understands that he's not alone in this experience. Across the city, across the world, others are discovering their own invisible readers, their own whispered narrators. A vast network of voices sharing stories, connecting strangers through the most intimate act of all, being listened to. Even in sleep, I can feel the truth of these words. Somewhere, other people are lying awake, listening to voices they can't explain. Other people are questioning their sanity, wondering if they're the first to experience this, or the last to notice something that's always been there. The voice speaks of community, of shared experience, of the comfort that comes from knowing you're not alone in your impossibility. And as I drift deeper into dreams, I find myself grateful for the companion who chose me, who decided I was worth reading to, worth sharing stories with during the long, silent hours of the night. Tomorrow, I'll probably convince myself this was all a hallucination. Tomorrow, in daylight, with coffee and rationality to guide me, I'll dismiss tonight as stress-induced fantasy. I'll open my laptop and read in silence like a normal person, and everything will be ordinary again. But tonight, wrapped in darkness and whispered stories, I'll let myself believe in invisible readers and impossible voices. I'll let myself be part of something larger than loneliness, something that makes the empty hours feel full and the solitary moments feel shared. The voice continues reading, and I continue listening, and somewhere between sleep and waking, I stop caring whether any of this is real. Reality, I'm learning, is negotiable, and sometimes the things that shouldn't exist are exactly the things we need most. He sleeps now, but the voice doesn't stop. It never stops. It simply waits for the next person to need a story, the next lonely reader scrolling through impossible tales in the blue light of their screen. Because everyone, eventually, needs someone to read to them. Everyone needs to know they're not alone with their words, their fears, their questions about what's real and what's not. The voice remembers every story it's ever told, every person it's ever accompanied through their dark hours of doubt and wonder. And tomorrow night, when someone new sits alone with their glowing screen, searching for proof that impossible things happen to ordinary people, the voice will be there again, reading, whispering, sharing the intimate act of story with anyone brave enough to listen. I dream of voices, and in my dreams, they're all familiar. They're all mine, and I understand, finally, that the person reading to me has been me all along, some part of myself that needed to be heard, needed to be witnessed, needed to know that even the strangest experiences can be shared if you know how to listen for the right voice in the dark. When morning comes, I'll remember this differently. But for now, in the space between sleeping and waking, between real and imagined. I let the voice continue its reading, grateful for the company, grateful for the stories, grateful for the reminder that no one has to be alone with the impossible. The whisper continues, and I listen, and somewhere in the city someone else opens their laptop and begins to read, unaware that they're about to discover they have a companion who's been waiting patiently for them to pay attention, to acknowledge what's been there all along. The voice finds everyone, eventually. Tonight, it found me. Tomorrow night, it will find someone else who needs to know. They're not alone with their words, their screens. They're late. Night searches for proof that the world is stranger and more connected than it appears. And the reading will continue, whispered and intimate and impossible, until everyone who needs to hear it understands. You are never really reading alone. Story 5. The darkness is complete now, so absolute that I can't tell if my eyes are open or closed. The power went out sometime after 11, taking with it the familiar constellation of LED lights that normally mark the boundaries of my bedroom, the alarm clock, the phone charger, the humidifiers' soft blue glow. Without these technological anchors, the room has dissolved into something primordial and infinite. I should be sleeping, would be sleeping under normal circumstances. The day was long and draining, filled with meetings and deadlines and the kind of small frustrations that accumulate like sediment until your bones feel heavy with exhaustion. But sleep requires a certain trust in your environment, a faith that the world will remain consistent while your consciousness retreats. Tonight, that faith feels misplaced. It started with a voice. Not my neighbor's television bleeding through the walls. Not a conversation from the hallway outside my apartment. This voice emerged from the darkness itself, as if the absence of light had given it permission to speak. Soft at first, barely audible, above the whisper of air through the heating vents, but gradually growing more distinct, more intentional. Someone reading aloud. The words drift through the black air like smoke, forming sentences I can almost, but not quite catch. The voice is pleasant, conversational, with the kind of measured cadence that suggests familiarity with the material, like a favorite teacher reading from a beloved book, or a parent sharing bedtime stories with a sleepy child. But there's no one here except me. I lie still, listening, trying to distinguish individual words from the gentle murmur. The voice speaks with confidence, following some internal rhythm that feels both foreign and familiar. Occasionally, I catch fragments. The door was locked from the inside, and no one could explain the footprints. And she swore she heard her name being called. Phrases that suggest the kind of story that makes sense in darkness, but seems silly in daylight. The rational part of my mind catalogues possible explanations. Auditory hallucinations brought on by fatigue. Sound from another apartment distorted by the building's architecture. A radio somewhere, tuned to a station I can't identify. These explanations feel thin, insufficient to account for the clarity and intimacy of what I'm hearing, but they're preferable to the alternative, because the alternative is that someone is here with me in the dark, someone I can't see or locate, someone who has chosen this moment to begin reading aloud for reasons I can't fathom. I reach for my phone, feeling along the nightstand until my fingers find its familiar shape. But the screen remains black when I press the power button. Dead battery. Or perhaps the outage has affected more than just the building's electricity. Either way, I'm left with only my ears and the growing certainty that I'm not alone. The voice continues, unhurried and patient. Now I can make out more of the words, can follow the thread of what sounds like a first-person narrative. Someone describing their gradual realization that their house is not quite right, that the rooms have subtly changed dimensions, that doors open onto spaces that weren't there before. The kind of story that makes perfect sense when you're lying in the dark, questioning the reliability of your own senses. I measured the hallway 3 times. The voice says, and now I'm certain it's speaking directly to me, sharing this story as if I'd requested it. 12 feet, 6 inches from the living room to the bedroom door. But when I walked it, counting my steps, it took 15 paces instead of the usual 10. The hallway had grown longer overnight, stretched like taffy while I slept. My skin prickles with recognition, not because I've heard this particular story before, but because I understand the feeling it describes, the sense that familiar spaces have become foreign, that the geometry of your own home has shifted in ways too subtle to prove, but too obvious to ignore. It's exactly the kind of anxiety that darkness amplifies, the fear that the world changes when you're not watching. I try to speak, to ask who's there, or demand they identify themselves, but my voice catches in my throat like cloth on a thorn. The darkness has weight here, pressing against my chest, making breath feel precious and words feel impossible. So I listen instead, letting the voice wash over me like warm water. The worst part wasn't the changes themselves. It continues, but the way everyone else acted like nothing had happened. My roommate walked the same hallway without noticing the extra distance. My friends visited and commented on how cozy the place was, never mentioning that the ceiling now pressed lower than before, that the windows had shifted slightly to the left of where they used to be. The story unfolds with dreamlike logic, each detail more unsettling than the last. Furniture that migrates across rooms when no one's looking. Photographs that show different scenes than they did the day before. A kitchen that sometimes has 2 sinks and sometimes has none, depending on who's doing the looking. The kind of impossible domesticity that feels entirely possible when you're suspended between sleep and waking. I find myself nodding along, even though the gesture is invisible in the darkness. The story resonates with something deep in my chest, some primal understanding that the world is less stable than we pretend. That consistency is a collective illusion we maintain through constant vigilance. When that vigilance relaxes in dreams, in darkness, in the vulnerable hours between night and dawn, other possibilities leak through. The narrator began keeping a journal. The voice says, and I realize the story has shifted perspective, become a story about someone telling a story. Layers within layers, like nested dreams. Writing down every change, every inconsistency, every moment when reality bent, just enough to let something else show through. But each morning, the journal was blank. Not erased, a blank. As if the words had never been written. As if the experiences had never happened. This detail makes my stomach clench with familiar dread. How many of my own experiences have I dismissed as dreams or imagination? How many strange moments have I explained away, convinced myself were products of fatigue or stress? The voice seems to understand this anxiety, to be speaking directly to my deepest uncertainties, about the nature of perception and memory. I want to reach for my own journal, the leather-bound notebook I keep on the nightstand for recording dreams and late night insights. But moving feels dangerous somehow, like it might break the spell that's allowing this voice to exist. Instead, I remain perfectly still, barely breathing, afraid that any disturbance might end the story before I understand what it's trying to tell me. The journal remained blank, but the memories persisted. The voice continues. Fragments of impossible experience that refuse to fade or resolve into rational explanation. The narrator began to suspect that some things can only be preserved in darkness, only shared in moments when the ordinary world has temporarily stepped aside. The words seem to hang in the air around me, vibrating with meaning that extends beyond their literal content. I'm being told something important, something I need to understand but can't quite grasp. The darkness feels alive now, responsive, like it's been waiting for this moment to reveal itself as something more than mere absence of light. My eyes have been closed this entire time, I realize. Or perhaps they've been open all along in this absolute darkness. The distinction has ceased to matter. What I'm seeing isn't visual anyway. It's something deeper, more fundamental. The story is painting pictures directly onto my consciousness, bypassing the usual channels of perception. Sometimes the voice whispers, and now it's so close I can almost feel breath against my ear. The most important truths can only be spoken in the dark. When vision fails, other senses sharpen. When the familiar world disappears, space opens for the impossible to unfold. The narrator learned to treasure these moments of blindness, to seek out the stories that only darkness could tell. I understand now that I'm not just listening to a story, I'm living one. The voice isn't separate from me. It's emerging from some deep place within my own consciousness, giving form to thoughts and fears I've never been able to articulate. The power outage hasn't trapped me in darkness. It's freed me to experience something that light would make impossible. The boundaries between sleeping and waking begin to blur. Or perhaps they were never as distinct as I believed. The voice continues speaking, but now it's harder to tell where the words end and my own thoughts begin. We're collaborating somehow, the voice and I, creating this story together in the space between dreamer and dream. In the morning, it says, when light returns and the ordinary world reassembles itself, the narrator will question whether any of this really happened. The journal will be blank. The memories will feel thin and insubstantial, like smoke trying to hold its shape in a strong wind. But something will remain, some trace of the truth that only darkness can reveal. I feel myself drifting, consciousness becoming fluid and formless. The voice continues, but it's inside me now, part of me, speaking words I somehow already know. We're telling each other stories in the dark, the voice and I, sharing the intimate experience of meaning, made manifest in the absence of everything that usually defines reality. The narrator sleeps now. The voice whispers, but the story continues. It always continues. In bedrooms across the city, other people are discovering what speaks when light fails, what stories emerge when the visible world steps aside. They're learning that darkness isn't empty. It's full of everything that light normally obscures. Sleep arrives like a gentle tide, carrying me away from the voice, even as it becomes more deeply embedded in my consciousness. In my dreams, I'm the narrator now, experiencing the elastic hallways and migrating furniture, writing in journals that erase themselves, measuring rooms that change dimensions when I'm not looking. But I'm also the voice, speaking these stories to other listeners suspended in their own darkness. You sharing the secret knowledge that can only be transmitted when ordinary perception fails. We're connected, all of us, or through the stories that speak themselves in the dark, through the understanding that reality is more negotiable than daylight allows us to believe. When morning comes, and it will come, the voice assures me I'll wake to find my power restored, my familiar bedroom reassembled around me. The journal on my nightstand will be blank, and I'll spend the day convincing myself that none of this really happened. Just dreams, I'll think. Just the mind playing tricks in the absence of sensory input. But late tonight, when I turn off the lights and settle into the darkness of intentional sleep, I'll listen more carefully to the silence. I'll pay attention to the spaces between one breath and the next, alert for the moment when darkness begins to speak. Because now I know the secret. We're never really alone in the dark. There are always voices waiting to share their stories. Always narratives unfolding in the spaces where light can't reach. All we have to do is listen, to trust the darkness enough to hear what it's been trying to tell us all along. The voice fades as I drift deeper into sleep, but it doesn't disappear. It settles into some quiet corner of my consciousness, patient and persistent, waiting for the next power outage, the next moment, when the visible world steps aside and reveals the stories that have always been there, speaking themselves in the dark, connecting us through the most intimate act of all, listening to the impossible and finding it true. Story 6. I found the letters again today, tucked behind my mother's jewelry box after the funeral. 3 years old, and I'm still discovering secrets she kept buried in the dark corners of our old house. The paper feels brittle between my fingers, yellowed with age, and the handwriting. God, the handwriting is so familiar it makes my skin crawl. Dear Emma, I saw you at the playground today. You were wearing the blue dress with tiny flowers. You have such beautiful hair when it catches the sunlight. The envelope bears no return address, postmarked from our own town. October 15th, 1987. I would have been 7 years old then. 7, and completely unaware that someone was watching me, documenting my movements, writing to me with the careful penmanship of a man who had all the time in the world. I can hear the old house settling around me as I read, each creak of the floorboards above sounding deliberate, purposeful. The heating system clicks on with its familiar wheeze, but tonight it sounds different. Tonight it sounds like breathing. Dear Emma, you dropped your backpack near the swings yesterday. I wanted to help you pick up your scattered crayons, but your mother came too quickly. She's very protective, isn't she? Always watching, always there. But she can't watch forever. My hands shake as I turn each page. There are dozens of them, carefully preserved in chronological order. Someone had been documenting my childhood with the methodical precision of a scientist studying a specimen. The letters span years, from when I was 7 until I turned 13, and we moved across town to a new house with better locks and brighter streetlights. The tea kettle whistles downstairs, though I don't remember putting it on. The sound cuts through the silence like a scream, then stops abruptly. My mother always said this house had its own personality, its own moods. Tonight, it feels watchful. Hef, dear Emma, how's I know about the new route you take to school? Maple Street, then cutting through the park. Your mother thinks you're taking the bus, but I see you walking alone each morning. The fog looks beautiful around your small shoulders. A floorboard groans somewhere in the hallway. Just the house settling, I tell myself. Just old wood adjusting to the night's cooling temperature. But the sound comes again, deliberate and measured, like footsteps pacing back and forth outside my childhood bedroom door. I flip through more letters, and the tone grows increasingly intimate, increasingly wrong. This person knew my daily routines, my favorite hiding spots, even the games I played alone in my backyard. They knew which window was my bedroom, which path I took to the corner store, what time my mother left for work each morning. Dear Emma, I tried calling your name today, but you didn't hear me. Or perhaps you chose not to turn around. That's all right. Sometimes the most beautiful conversations happen in silence. I'll wait. I have endless patience. The silence in the house feels thick now, pressing against my eardrums like cotton. But beneath it, I can hear something else, the soft scratch of pencil on paper, coming from somewhere deeper in the house. The same careful, measured scraping that might have created these very letters. My mother's voice echoes in my memory. Never talk to strangers, Emma. Never go anywhere alone. Always tell me if someone approaches you. She'd been so vigilant, so protective that I'd felt suffocated as a child. Friends would joke about my helicopter mother, the woman who seemed to have eyes in the back of her head. Now I understand why. Dear Emma, how your mother spoke to the police today. I saw the officers at your front door, taking notes, asking questions. She showed them something, photographs, perhaps. It doesn't matter. They can't protect what they can't see. And I've become very good at being invisible. The scratching sound stops. The house holds its breath, and so do I. In the silence, I can hear my own heartbeat, rapid and irregular, mixing with the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Or is it humming? The sound wavers, almost like someone humming a lullaby just out of earshot. Dear Emma, we moved away in such a hurry. No forwarding address, no goodbye. Your mother thinks distance will solve everything, but some connections transcend geography. Some bonds are stronger than locks and new addresses and unlisted phone numbers. That's when I notice the envelope at the bottom of the box. It's newer than the others, the paper crisp and white. The postmark is from last week, 3 days after my mother's funeral, 3 days after the obituary ran in the local paper, listing me as the surviving daughter, along with our current address. My fingers tremble as I open it. S. Dear Emma, Eva, welcome home. The scratching sound starts again, closer now. It's coming from the wall behind me, the shared wall with the room that used to be my mother's study. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch, pause. Like someone writing in careful, measured strokes. I press my ear against the cold wall and listen. The scratching stops. Then, so soft, I almost miss it, I hear breathing. Steady, patient breathing from the other side of the wall. But that room is empty. Has been empty since Mom died. I cleared it out myself, donated all her books and papers to the library. There's nothing in there but dust and old carpet stains. Dear Emma, you're reading this now, aren't you? I can feel your attention like sunlight on my face. After all these years, after all this waiting, you've finally come back to me. Your mother tried so hard to keep us apart, but she's gone now, isn't she? Gone, and we're finally alone. I've been staying in her study, you know. Such a cozy room, with its view of your old bedroom window. The locks were surprisingly easy to manage, and she never did fix that loose board in the back porch. I've been waiting here for you to come home, watching you sort through her things, learning your new routines. Vav, you still have beautiful hair, Emma. It still catches the light the same way. The breathing through the wall grows louder, more deliberate. I can hear the soft creak of someone shifting their weight, the subtle scratch of fabric against the wall. Someone has been living in there, watching me through the thin partition between the rooms. My mother's protection hadn't been paranoia after all. It had been necessary, vital. The only thing standing between me and something patient and persistent and wrong. And now she's gone, and I'm here alone, and the thing that wrote these letters has been waiting. Dear Emma, don't be afraid. After all these years of correspondence, we're finally going to meet properly. I have so much to show you, so many memories to share. I've kept everything. You know, photographs, recordings, little treasures from when you were small. I know you've been reading my letters. I can hear you breathing through the wall, just like I've been listening to you. We're both here now, separated by just a few inches of plaster and wood. Isn't it wonderful how close we've always been? Off turn around, Emma. I think it's time we finally said hello. The scratching stops. The breathing stops. The old house seems to hold its breath, waiting. Behind me, I hear the soft whisper of a door opening. The door to my mother's study, the room I thought was empty. Of the room where someone has been living and waiting and watching. I don't turn around. Not yet. Because once I do, everything changes. Once I turn around, the 23 years of protection my mother built around me crumbles, and I have to face whatever has been patient enough to wait this long. The floorboards behind me creak softly, deliberately. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Hello, Emma, says a voice I've never heard but somehow recognize, gentle and familiar and completely wrong. I've missed you so much. I close my eyes and listen to the house around us, to the settling wood and shifting shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticks steadily, marking time that no longer seems to move forward, but circles back on itself, trapping us in this moment where childhood fears meet adult understanding. The voice speaks again, closer now, and I can feel breath on the back of my neck. Don't you want to turn around? After all this time, after all my letters, I have so much to tell you, Emma. So much we need to catch up on. And in the darkness behind my closed eyes, I realize that some pen-pal relationships are never meant to end. Some correspondence continues long past childhood, long past protection, long past the point where anyone can save you from the patient attention of someone who has been writing your name in careful, measured strokes for 23 years. The house settles around us with a sound like sighing, and I finally begin to turn around. Story 7. The apartment feels different when you're alone. Not empty, never empty, but expectant, like it's holding its breath. I've been living here for 3 years, and usually the solitude comforts me. Tonight, with Sarah visiting her sister and the weekend stretching ahead, I should be relieved. Instead, I can't shake the feeling that the silence is too complete, too carefully orchestrated. I slip on my headphones and scroll through my playlist. Classical tonight, I think. Something soothing. Debussy's Clair de Lune begins to flow through the noise, canceling speakers, and I sink into my reading chair with a book I've been meaning to finish. The piano notes wash over me like water, and for a moment, the apartment's strange mood seems to lift. But there's something underneath the music, a sound that doesn't belong. I pause the track and pull off one headphone, listening. Nothing. Just the distant hum of the refrigerator and the soft whisper of air through the heating vents. I put the headphone back on and press play. A scratch, scratch. There it is again. Faint but persistent, like fingernails dragging across wood. I stop the music entirely and sit in the sudden quiet, my heart rate picking up despite myself. The sound comes again, a deliberate scraping that seems to be coming from the front door. I approach slowly, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The scratching stops. I press my ear against the cool metal of the door and listen. Nothing. No footsteps in the hallway, no voices, no sound of the old elevator groaning to life. Through the peephole, the hallway appears empty. The fluorescent lights flicker slightly, casting shifting shadows that make the familiar space look foreign. Mrs. Chen's door across the hall remains closed, her doormat slightly askew as always. Everything looks normal. I return to my chair and restart the music. But now I can't concentrate. Every few minutes, I find myself pausing the track to listen, convinced I'm hearing that scratching sound again. The fourth time I do this, I notice something that makes my blood chill. There, at the bottom of the door, something white is visible against the dark wood. Paper. Someone has slipped something under my door while I was sitting just 15 feet away, and I never heard their footsteps. The paper is folded once, my name written on the outside in careful block letters. Inside, in the same precise handwriting, Ezer I ken shiar yo USEC, and my hands shake as I read it again. Someone was standing outside my door, listening to my headphones, watching me through the peephole perhaps. But that's impossible. The hallway has been empty every time I've checked, and the sound isolation in these headphones is nearly perfect. I look at the door again, and that's when I notice the scratches. Fresh scratches in the paint near the handle, forming letters. Crude, jagged letters that spell out, Low Oak A.T. Mere. They weren't there an hour ago. I'm certain of that. I would have noticed. I grab my phone and dial the building's security number, but it goes straight to voicemail. Tuv. Of course, it's past 10 on a Friday night, and building management doesn't exactly prioritize weekend coverage. I consider calling the police, but what would I tell them? Someone scratched words on my door and slipped me a note. They'd think I was paranoid, or worse, creating drama for attention. Instead, I double, check the locks, both the deadbolt and the chain, and return to my chair. But the music feels wrong now, too isolating. Every time a quiet passage comes, I strain to hear what might be happening beyond the walls of my apartment. I switch to something louder, more complex. Bach's Goldberg Variations, played on a full concert grand. The piano fills my head with cascading notes, and I try to lose myself in the mathematical beauty of the composition. But there's something off about the recording tonight. Between the variations, in the spaces where the pianist's hands lift from the keys, I can hear breathing that isn't mine. I stop the music and pull off the headphones. Silence. Then, after a moment, the scratching starts again. Not at the door this time, at the wall behind my chair. The shared wall with the apartment next door, which has been empty for months, according to the landlord. A scratch, scratch, scratch. Rhythmic and deliberate, like someone carving letters into the drywall. I place my palm against the wall and feel the vibrations of whatever tool is being used on the other side. It stops when I touch the wall, as if whoever is doing it knows I'm listening. A new piece of paper appears under the door. This time I see it happen. A thin white edge sliding across the threshold while I'm watching. But when I run to the door and look through the peephole, the hallway is empty. Completely empty, with no possible hiding place. IKNBRO YAUURA LUSTEN. This note is different. The handwriting is shakier, more urgent. Below the text, someone has drawn a crude sketch of a face, just circles for eyes, and a straight line for a mouth. But the eyes have been traced over so many times that the paper is nearly torn through, and the line of the mouth curves upward in what might be a smile or might be something else entirely. The scratching resumes, louder now, coming from multiple walls at once. My neighbors on all sides seem to be carving simultaneously, their tools scraping in perfect synchronization. But that's impossible. The Hendersons to my left are in Florida for the month, and the apartment to my right has been vacant since I moved in. I put the headphones back on and turn the volume up, desperate to drown out the sound. But now the breathing in the music is more pronounced, almost panting. During a quiet passage in the second variation, I hear something that makes me freeze. My name. Someone is whispering my name between the piano notes, so softly I might be imagining it. But there it is again, threaded through the melody like a counterpoint. Jessica! Jessica, why won't you look at me? I rip the headphones off, but the apartment is silent. No scratching, no whispers, just the soft hum of normal life. The sudden quiet is almost worse than the noise. It feels expectant, like the moment before someone jumps out to surprise you. Another paper slides under the door. I don't bother to check the peephole this time. I know it will be empty. ROTROND. The handwriting is deteriorating, becoming jagged and desperate. The letters are pressed so hard into the paper that some of them have torn through. At the bottom of the note, that same face is drawn again, but now the mouth is definitely smiling. The eyes are larger too, taking up most of the circular head, and they're filled in completely with black ink. I realize I haven't turned around since the scratching started. I've been facing forward toward the door, but my back has been to the rest of the apartment for the past 20 minutes. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway leading to the bedroom, all of it behind me, unseen. But I can't turn around. Some primitive instinct warns me that acknowledging what might be behind me will make it real in a way it isn't now. As long as I don't look, it exists in a state of uncertainty. The moment I turn, everything changes. The scratching starts again, but now it's coming from directly behind me. Not through the walls, not from another apartment, but from inside this room. The sound of something sharp dragging across the hardwood floor, getting closer. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Deliberate, patient, like someone drawing letters in the wood dust, that accumulates in the corners of old apartments. I put the headphones back on, but there's no music playing. Just silence filled with the sound of my own rapid breathing. And underneath that, barely audible, the whisper of my name being repeated like a prayer or a curse. The paper appears again, but this time it doesn't slide under the door. It materializes on the floor beside my chair, folded neatly. My name written in that increasingly frantic handwriting. I don't want to open it. I know that whatever is written inside will change something fundamental about my situation. Some messages are doors that can't be unopened. Some knowledge can't be unknown. But my hands move without my permission, unfolding the paper with trembling fingers. I'm RIGHT Andy Yo-You. The scratching stops. The whispers stop. Even the ambient sounds of the building seem to pause, as if the entire world is holding its breath. In the sudden, complete silence, I can hear something that shouldn't be there, the soft inhale and exhale of someone breathing directly behind my chair. Slow, steady breaths that mirror my own panicked gasps. And with each exhale, the faintest whisper of, "Look at me, Jessica. I've been waiting so long for you to look at me." Dice, I close my eyes and try to rationalize what's happening. Hallucinations brought on by isolation and stress. Sleep deprivation. Carbon monoxide from a faulty heater. There has to be a logical explanation for the papers. The scratching. The impossible presence behind me. But logic doesn't explain the warmth. I can feel radiating from something just inches behind my chair. It doesn't explain how I can smell something sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in water. It doesn't explain the sound of clothing rustling, as whatever is behind me shifts its weight, settling in for a long wait. I wrote you so many notes, Jessica, but you never look. You never acknowledge me. All I want is for you to turn around. The voice is clearer now, no longer filtered through headphones or hidden beneath scratching sounds. It's patient and sad and completely wrong, like a child's voice coming from an adult throat. Another paper appears, this one dropping from above to land in my lap. The handwriting has changed again, becoming almost elegant in its precision. I'm not going anywhere, Jessica. I've been waiting in your apartment for so long, watching you read and listen to music and live your careful, quiet life. I've learned your routines, your preferences, your fears. I know you don't like to be surprised, so I've been giving you warnings, notes, scratches, little sounds to prepare you. But preparation time is over now. We need to have a conversation, you and I. We need to discuss why you've been ignoring me, pretending I don't exist, refusing to acknowledge the notes I've left for you every day for months. Of every day, Jessica. Every single day since you moved in. I've been trying to get your attention. The papers you find in your kitchen each morning, that you throw away without reading. The sounds in the walls that you blame on old pipes. The whispers in your music that you convince yourself are audio compression artifacts. I've been so patient, but patience has its limits. My mind races back through the past months, recontextualizing dozens of small, strange incidents. The papers I assumed were junk mail. The sounds I attributed to other tenants. The moments when I felt watched, observed, studied. Turn around, Jessica. Let's finally meet properly. If the breathing behind me grows deeper, more expectant, I can feel the presence leaning closer. And there's the faintest touch of air movement. against the back of my neck, as if someone is exhaling directly onto my skin. The last paper falls into my lap, and this one contains just 4 words, written in increasingly large letters. OOKTME Nullo, and I realize that I'm going to turn around. Not because I want to, but because the alternative sitting here, forever with something patient and persistent breathing down my neck, is worse than whatever revelation awaits me. My muscles tense. My breathing slows. In a moment, I'm going to discover what has been living in my apartment, writing me notes, carving messages into my walls, waiting with the infinite patience of something that doesn't need to sleep or eat or exist in the normal flow of time. I start to turn, inch by careful inch, and behind me, I hear the soft rustle of movement as something prepares to finally be seen. That's it, Jessica. That's perfect. I've been waiting so long to show you my face. Story 8. The coffee shop on 5th Street has become my sanctuary, my refuge from the growing certainty that I'm losing my mind. I sit here every morning before work, laptop open, pretending to write, but really just watching the door. Watching for him. For Dr. Ramsey. It started 3 weeks ago. Though I suppose it really started 27 years ago when I was 8 years old and learned what it meant to be afraid of a stranger's smile. I remember that day with the horrible clarity that trauma burns into memory. Walking home from school alone because Mom had to work late again. The black sedan pulling up alongside me. Window rolling down with that soft electric whir. A man in his 40s with kind eyes and a gentle voice asking if I needed a ride home. Hello there. You look tired. Walking in this heat. I'm Dr. Ramsey. Would you like me to drive you home? I'm a doctor, so you can trust me. Say even at 8. Something felt wrong. The way he said his name, like it should mean something to me. The way his fingers drummed against the steering wheel in a nervous rhythm. The sweet, chemical smell drifting from his car later. I would recognize it as chloroform, though at the time it just made my stomach turn. I ran. I sprinted the 6 blocks home with his car creeping along behind me. He always maintaining that careful distance that could be explained as coincidence. When I reached our driveway, at the sound the sedan idled at the corner for several long minutes before driving away. My mother believed me, called the police, filed a report. They took it seriously enough to patrol our neighborhood more frequently for a few weeks. But Dr. Ramsey, if that was even his real name, never appeared again. At least, not until 3 weeks ago. I was waiting for the bus downtown when I saw him. Older now, grayer, but unmistakably the same man. The same patient eyes. The same careful way of moving, like he was always thinking 3 steps ahead. He was reading a newspaper on a bench across the street, and when our eyes met, he smiled. That same gentle, predatory smile from my childhood nightmares. He folded his newspaper, stood up, and walked away, but not before touching the brim of his hat in what might have been a polite gesture, or might have been a promise. Since then, I've seen him everywhere, in the reflection of store windows as I pass, in the crowd at the grocery store, always 1 aisle over, in the back seat of cars waiting at red lights, watching me cross the street. Never close enough to be threatening, never obviously following, but always there. My friends think I'm experiencing some kind of delayed stress response. You're 35, David. Why would this suddenly be bothering you now? But they don't understand. This isn't about the past bubbling up. This is about the present, about Dr. Ramsey returning for whatever he couldn't finish all those years ago. The coffee shop bell chimes, and I look up from my untouched laptop screen. My heart stops. Dr. Ramsey is standing in line, wearing a navy wool coat and leather gloves despite the warm weather. He orders his coffee black, no sugar, and finds a table in the corner where he can watch the entire room, where he can watch me. I pretend to type, but my hands are shaking so badly I can barely hit the keys. In my peripheral vision, I can see him reading what appears to be a medical journal, occasionally glancing up to study the other customers. When his gaze falls on me, he smiles that same patient smile and returns to his reading. This goes on for 20 minutes. Him reading and occasionally looking up. Me pretending to work while my heart pounds against my ribs. The other customers coming and going, oblivious to the strange tableau playing out in the corner of their morning routine. Finally, Dr. Ramsey closes his journal, stands, and walks to my table. Up close, he looks exactly as I remember, as if the past 27 years have touched him so lightly, they might have been 27 days. David. His voice is the same soft, careful tone from my childhood. David Martinez. My goodness, how you've grown. I can't speak, can barely breathe. He's standing so close I can smell that same sweet chemical odor clinging to his clothes. May I sit? I feel like we have so much to catch up on. Without waiting for permission, he settles into the chair across from me. His movements are careful, deliberate, like everything about him. He folds his hands on the table and studies my face with professional interest. You look well, David, though I can see the stress in your eyes. Are you sleeping? Eating properly? Stress can manifest in so many ways. Who are you? I manage to whisper. What do you want? I told you who I am, Dr. Ramsey, and I want what I've always wanted to help you. David, you were such a troubled child, running away from assistance. But you're an adult now. Surely you can see that running isn't always the answer. He reaches into his coat pocket, and I tense, ready to bolt. But he only pulls out a small notebook, the kind doctors use to write prescriptions. He flips through several pages covered in neat handwriting. Let's see. David Martinez, born 1988, currently employed at Henderson, an associates accounting firm. Lives alone in apartment 4B at 1247 Elm Street. Parents deceased. I'm sorry for your losses, by the way. No siblings, few close friends. A very solitary life, wouldn't you say? The casual recitation of my personal information chills me more than any threat could. He's been watching me, studying me, compiling a file like I'm his patient. How do you know all that? Research, David. Preparation. I've been following your progress for years, checking in periodically. You've grown into exactly the kind of person I thought you might isolated, anxious, resistant to help. It's quite common in cases like yours. See, cases like mine. Children who run away from help, who reject assistance when it's offered. It creates a pattern of destructive behavior that can persist well into adulthood. But it's treatable, David. Very treatable. He leans forward, and his eyes have the intense focus of someone who's found exactly what they've been looking for. I've been waiting for the right time to reconnect with you. When you were older, more capable of understanding what I was trying to do for you. what I'm still trying to do.
What?
I don't need help. I need you to leave me alone. But you do need help, David. Look at yourself sitting alone in a coffee shop, jumping at shadows, afraid to form meaningful connections. This is what happens when childhood trauma goes untreated. But I can fix that. I can help you become the person you were meant to be. Bo. Say, his voice carries the absolute conviction of someone who believes completely in their own righteousness. And somehow, that's more terrifying than if he were obviously malicious. I have to go, I say, starting to close my laptop. Of course you do. Running away again, just like when you were 8. But, David, he reaches across the table and places his hand over mine, and his skin is impossibly cold through the leather gloves. You can't run forever. Eventually, everyone needs help, and I'm very, very patient. He releases my hand and stands, putting his notebook back in his pocket. I'll be seeing you around, David. When you're ready to stop running, I'll be here. He walks away, leaving me sitting at the table with my hand still tingling from his touch. Through the window, I watch him get into the same black sedan from my childhood, or one exactly like it, and drive slowly away. That was this morning. Now, 12 hours later, I'm sitting in my apartment as the sun sets, trying to convince myself it was all some kind of elaborate hallucination. But the coffee cup he drank from is still in my car, where I grabbed it after he left, and it carries that same sweet chemical smell. The phone rings. I almost don't answer it. I've been screening calls all day, but the caller ID shows my office number. Hello. David. Dr. Ramsey's voice comes through the speaker, calm and professional. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the office directory. Such helpful people at Henderson and Associates. My blood turns to ice. How did you get into my office? I told them I was your doctor, that there was a family emergency. People are always so willing to help when they think it's a medical situation. I spoke with your supervisor, Rebecca, I believe. Such a kind woman. She's very worried about your recent behavior, by the way. The missed deadlines, the distraction, the paranoia. She thinks you might benefit from professional help. Psst. I hang up immediately and unplug the phone from the wall. But 5 minutes later, my cell phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Hanging up won't help, David. We need to finish our conversation. Then another. I'm still very patient, but patience isn't infinite. And at another. Look outside your window. I have something to show you. I don't want to look. Every instinct screams at me to stay away from the windows, to hide in the bathroom, where there are no sight lines from the street. But some horrible compulsion draws me forward. Dr. Ramsey is standing under the streetlight, directly across from my building, looking up at my 4th floor window. In his hands, he's holding what appears to be a medical bag, the old-fashioned leather kind, that doctors used to carry on house calls. Our eyes meet through the glass, and he lifts the bag slightly, showing it to me. Then he points to my building's front entrance and starts walking toward it. My intercom buzzes. Once, twice, 3 times. Then his voice comes through the speaker, distorted but unmistakable Eve. Hello, David. I'm here to help. Please buzz me up. It's time for your appointment. Plus, I back away from the intercom, but it buzzes again and again. The sound fills my apartment, relentless and patient, like everything else about Dr. Ramsey. I know you can hear me, David. I can see your lights on. There's no point in hiding now. We both know how this ends. The buzzing stops. In the silence, I can hear my own ragged breathing and the distant hum of traffic. Then, impossibly, I hear footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Slow, measured steps that stop directly outside my apartment. A soft knock. David. It's Dr. Ramsey. I'm here to help. Yes, but I never buzzed him in. The front door of the building is locked. Requires a code or a tenant to open it from the inside. There's no way he could be standing outside my door. The knock comes again, accompanied by the soft rattle of someone trying the handle. F. I know you're frightened, David. It's perfectly natural, but you can't heal if you don't face your fears. Let me in, and we can work through this together. I look through the peephole, and my legs nearly give out. Dr. Ramsey is standing in the hallway, but he's not alone. Behind him, barely visible in the dim light, are other figures. Men and women of various ages, all standing perfectly still, all staring at my door with the same patient expression. These are some of my other patients, David. People who initially ran away, just like you. But eventually, they learned to accept help, to trust the process. They're much better now. Happier. More at peace. The figures behind him don't move, don't speak. They just stand there with that same serene, empty expression, like people waiting for instructions they know will eventually come. Open the door, David. Let me help you become who you were meant to be. Let me help you stop running. My phone buzzes again. A photo this time, showing the interior of my apartment from an impossible angle, as if it were taken from inside my bedroom closet. In the image, I can see myself standing by the door, looking through the peephole. The text that follows makes my knees buckle. I've been inside for hours, David, waiting for you to come home, waiting for the right moment to help you. I turn toward my bedroom, and that's when I see it, my closet door, slightly ajar, when I distinctly remember closing it this morning. A thin sliver of darkness that could hide anything, anyone. You see, David. Dr. Ramsey's voice comes through the door, patient as ever. There's nowhere to run this time. I'm here to help, whether you're ready or not. For the knocking stops. The hallway falls silent. But now I can hear something else. The soft creak of floorboards from inside my bedroom. Someone moving carefully, deliberately, trying not to make noise. I grab a knife from the kitchen drawer and move toward the bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. The closet door swings open just as I reach the threshold, empty. Nothing but my clothes hanging in neat rows and the smell of mothballs. But on the floor, placed carefully among my shoes, is a small leather medical bag, the same one I saw Dr. Ramsey carrying under the streetlight. I back away from the closet, and that's when I notice the other changes to my apartment. Small things, easily missed if you weren't looking. A chair moved slightly to the left, books rearranged on the shelf. The coffee mug I left in the sink, now sitting clean and dry beside the others. Someone has been living here, moving through my space, touching my belongings, making themselves at home while I was at work or asleep or sitting in coffee shops. Paranoid and afraid. My phone rings. Dr. Ramsey again. Did you find my bag, David? I left it there for you. A gesture of trust. Inside, you'll find everything we need for your treatment. Treatment for what? For the fear, David. The running. the inability to accept help when it's offered. It's a very specific condition, and I've become quite expert at treating it over the years. I don't open the bag. I don't even touch it. But I can see the brass clasps gleaming in the lamplight, and somehow I know that opening it would be crossing a line I could never uncross. "Where are you?" I whisper into the phone. "I'm exactly where I need to be, David. The question is, are you ready to stop running? Are you ready to let me help you?" The line goes dead. The apartment falls silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and my own ragged breathing. I stand there for a long moment, kitchen knife in one hand, phone in the other, trying to process what's happening to me. Then I hear it, the sound I've been dreading since I was 8 years old. The soft whisper of a car door closing outside my building. The gentle purr of an engine starting. The slow, deliberate sound of a vehicle pulling away from the curb. I run to the window and look down. The black sedan is driving away, its taillights disappearing around the corner. But Dr. Ramsey isn't in it. The car is empty, driving itself with that same patient, methodical precision that characterizes everything about him. Behind me, in the bedroom, something clicks. The sound of the medical bag opening. I turn, and there he is, Dr. Ramsey, standing beside my bed, wearing surgical gloves and a gentle smile. In his hands, he holds a syringe filled with something clear and viscous. "Hello, David. Thank you for waiting. I know this is frightening, but I promise you'll feel much better once we begin." I raise the knife, but my hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold it. "Stay away from me. David. Still trying to run, even when there's nowhere to go. But that's all right. Resistance is part of the process. My other patients fought too. In the beginning, he takes a step toward me, and I back against the wall. There's nowhere left to retreat. The injection will help you relax, help you stop fighting what's inevitable. You've been running for 27 years, David. Isn't it time to rest? What do you want from me? To complete your treatment, to turn you into the person you were always meant to be: calm, compliant, at peace. Like my other patients. They don't run anymore. David, they don't fight or struggle or live in fear. They're perfectly content to do exactly what they're told. He raises the syringe, and the needle catches the light like a tiny silver fang. "This won't hurt, David. And afterward, you'll understand why I've been so patient, why I've waited so long to help you. You'll thank me for not giving up on you when everyone else would have." I lunge forward with the knife. But he's faster than he should be, more agile than a man his age has any right to be. His hand closes around my wrist with impossible strength, and the knife clatters to the floor. "Shh, David. Stop fighting. Let me help you." The needle slides into my neck with barely a pinprick of pain. Almost immediately, I feel the chemicals spreading through my bloodstream, warm and heavy and wrong. That's it. Just relax. Let the medicine work. My vision blurs. My legs give out, and I collapse onto the bed. Dr. Ramsey sits beside me, stroking my forehead with his gloved hand. "You're going to be so much happier now, David. So much more at peace. No more running. No more fear. No more loneliness. Just calm, perfect compliance." The room spins around me, and his voice seems to come from very far away. "Sleep now, David. When you wake up, you'll be exactly who you were always meant to be. One of my success stories. One of my perfectly adjusted patients. as consciousness fades, I hear him moving around the room, gathering his supplies, preparing for whatever comes next. And in that last moment before the darkness takes me, I understand with horrible clarity that Dr. Ramsey was never lying. He really is here to help. The question is, will I still be me when his help is finished? Story 9. My name is Dr. Victor Petrov, and I am the only surviving witness to what happened in Laboratory 7 during the winter of 1947. What I am about to record may never be believed, may never be published, may never see the light of day beyond these sealed files in the deepest archives of what was once the Soviet Ministry of Internal Affairs. But I must document what we discovered in that concrete bunker beneath the Siberian research facility, if only to warn others about the fundamental nature of human consciousness and the terrible things that live in the spaces where wakefulness meets exhaustion. The experiment began, as so many did during those years, with the promise of advancing the motherland through scientific inquiry that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. We had been tasked with investigating the effects of prolonged wakefulness on human subjects, using a chemical compound designated only as Agent X19, which our colleagues in biochemistry assured us would safely prevent sleep for extended periods. I was young then, recently graduated from Moscow University with degrees in psychology and neurology, eager to contribute to the great scientific advances that would define the post-war era. The project seemed straightforward enough. Monitor 5 volunteer subjects as they remained awake for 30 days, documenting the psychological and physiological changes that occurred as their bodies were deprived of natural sleep cycles. The subjects were political prisoners, men who had been promised reduced sentences in exchange for their participation. I told myself this was standard protocol, that their crimes against the state made them suitable for research that might ultimately benefit humanity. Looking back now, I recognize this rationalization for what it was: the willingness of a naive young scientist to participate in something monstrous, because it was wrapped in the language of progress and patriotism. The laboratory itself was constructed specifically for this experiment, a sealed chamber 15 feet by 20 feet, with reinforced concrete walls 3 feet thick and a single observation window made of bulletproof glass. Inside, we provided basic amenities: 5 cots, a toilet, adequate lighting, and an intercom system for communication. The chamber was pumped full of Agent X19 through the ventilation system, maintaining a constant concentration that would prevent the subjects from achieving REM sleep, while theoretically allowing them to remain conscious and functional. Dr. Yolanda Volkov, the project director, briefed us on the expected timeline. Days 1 through 7 would show increased irritability and minor cognitive impairment, similar to ordinary sleep deprivation. Days 8 through 14 would demonstrate more significant psychological effects: hallucinations, paranoia, decreased motor function. Days 15 through 20, one would push the subjects into uncharted territory, as no human had been kept awake for such extended periods under controlled conditions. Beyond 21 days, we would be exploring completely unknown psychological terrain. The 5 subjects entered the chamber on a Monday morning in February, when the Siberian winter had turned the world outside into a landscape of white silence. I still remember their names, though I wish I could forget. Alexei Kozlov, a former party official convicted of embezzlement, Dmitry Petrov, a military deserter, Ivan Semenov, a suspected spy, Mikhail Volkov, a black marketeer, and Pavel Novak, whose crimes were so classified that even we researchers were not told what he had done. They seemed almost cheerful as they settled into the chamber, joking among themselves about the easy assignment they had drawn. 30 days of staying awake in exchange for reduced sentences. It seemed like a fair trade to men who had been facing decades in the gulags. For the first 72 hours, everything proceeded according to our predictions. The subjects remained alert and cooperative, engaging in conversation with each other and with us through the intercom. They played cards, shared stories from their pasts, and even maintained reasonable hygiene. Agent X-19 appeared to be working exactly as designed, preventing sleep without causing obvious distress. It was on the 4th day that we noticed the first subtle changes. The subjects were still awake, still functional, but their interactions with each other had become strained. Conversations were shorter, more tense. They began to separate into smaller groups within the chamber, with Alexei and Dmitry staying near the observation window, while the other 3 gravitated toward the far corner. Doctor. Volkov noted increased irritability in her log, but attributed it to normal responses to confinement and sleep deprivation. We had expected this phase, had prepared for it. What we had not anticipated was the quality of their alertness. Normal sleep-deprived subjects become sluggish, their reaction time slow, their cognitive function impaired. But our subjects seemed to be becoming more alert, not less. Their movements were quicker, more precise. Their eyes tracked motion with predatory focus. When they looked directly into the observation window, it felt less like they were looking at us and more like they were looking through us, seeing things beyond our perception. By the end of the first week, they had stopped talking to us entirely. They still communicated with each other, but only in whispers we couldn't make out through the intercom system. When we tried to engage them directly, asking about their physical condition, their psychological state, their needs, they would turn toward the observation window with expressions of polite curiosity, as if they found our questions mildly amusing but not worth answering. Dr. Volkov increased the concentration of Agent X-19, concerned that they might be managing to achieve micro sleep episodes despite the chemical intervention, but monitoring equipment confirmed that their brain activity showed no signs of sleep cycles. They were genuinely, completely awake, 24 hours a day, and they were changing. The physical alterations became apparent during the 2nd week. All 5 subjects began to lose weight despite consuming their full rations. Their faces became gaunt, almost skeletal, but their eyes grew larger and brighter. Their hair began to thin and take on a gray pallor, though none of them were older than 45. Most disturbing were their movements. The jerky, uncoordinated motions typical of sleep-deprived subjects had been replaced by fluid, almost dance, like grace. They moved through the chamber like predators, in perfect synchronization with each other, as if they were responding to cues we couldn't perceive. It was Alexei who first began the writing, using his own fingernails. He started carving symbols into the concrete wall near his cot. Not letters or numbers, but geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle from which they were viewed. The other subjects watched him work, nodding approval, occasionally making corrections to his marks. When we asked him what he was writing, he finally broke the silence that had lasted for days. "We are documenting the awakening," he said in a voice that was barely recognizable as his own. It had taken on harmonics that seemed to resonate from somewhere deeper than his throat. "You wouldn't understand the language. It's not meant for the sleeping." The sleeping, Dr. Volkov asked through the intercom. "What do you mean by the sleeping?" Alexei smiled, and his teeth looked sharper than they had 2 weeks earlier. "Everyone who still closes their eyes. Everyone who still dreams. Everyone who hasn't learned to see what's really there in the darkness." The other subjects laughed at this, and the sound made the hair on my arms stand on end. It wasn't quite human laughter. It had too many overtones, too many frequencies that human vocal cords shouldn't be able to produce. Dr. Volkov made notes about possible vocal cord damage caused by dehydration. But privately, I was beginning to suspect we were witnessing something far more fundamental than physical deterioration. By the end of the second week, the subjects had stopped eating solid food entirely. They consumed only water and the thin broth we provided, claiming that their bodies no longer needed the heavy nourishment that sustained ordinary humans. Medical monitoring showed that despite their dramatic weight loss, their vital signs remained stable. Their heart rates were slower than normal, their breathing deeper and more regular, as if they had achieved some kind of metabolic efficiency we didn't understand. The writing on the walls had expanded to cover nearly every surface in the chamber. The patterns were increasingly complex, incorporating mathematical relationships that hurt to look at directly. Our staff mathematician, Dr. Leonid Krylov, studied photographs of the markings and reported that they seemed to represent spatial relationships in more than 3 dimensions. It's as if they're mapping the geometry of space, time itself. He told us during a project briefing. But according to principles that don't match any known mathematics. The equations are consistent within their own logical framework, but they describe a universe that operates by different physical laws than our own. On the morning of day 15, we discovered that the subjects had dismantled their cots during the night. Not broken them apart in frustration or anger, but carefully, methodically taken them apart using only their fingernails and teeth. Or the metal frames had been twisted into new configurations that matched the geometric patterns on the walls, creating a 3-dimensional extension of their mathematical inscriptions. When asked why they had destroyed their furniture, Pavel, who had been the quietest of the group until now, stepped close to the observation window and pressed his palm against the glass. "We don't need to lie down anymore," he explained patiently, as if speaking to a child. "Sleep is a horizontal experience. We are learning to exist vertically, to stack our consciousness in layers that reach into spaces your kind can't perceive." His hand left a print on the glass that was wrong in ways I struggled to identify. The proportions were human, but the spaces between the fingers seemed to extend further than they should, as if his appendages existed partially in dimensions we couldn't see. Dr. Volkov ordered increased psychological evaluation protocols, but the subjects refused to participate in any standard tests. They claimed that our questions were based on outdated assumptions about the nature of consciousness, that we were trying to measure their psychological state using tools designed for the sleeping kind. Instead, they offered to teach us. "Let us show you what we've learned," Dmitri said during one communication session. "Turn off the gas. Join us in wakefulness. See what you've been missing all your lives when you close your eyes and let your minds go dark." The offer was simultaneously tempting and terrifying. Part of me wanted to understand what they were experiencing, to see the reality they claimed to perceive during their extended consciousness. But a deeper part of my mind, the part that had been trained in scientific skepticism, recognized that we were no longer observing human subjects undergoing sleep deprivation. We were watching something else entirely. The transformation accelerated during the third week. The subjects' physical forms became increasingly distorted, though in ways that were subtle enough that each individual change seemed almost within the range of normal human variation. Their limbs elongated slightly. Their joints became more flexible, allowing them to move in ways that should have been impossible without dislocation. Their spines curved in new configurations that let them assume positions that maximized their contact with the geometric patterns they had carved into the walls. Most disturbing was what happened to their faces. The bone structure remained recognizably human, but the proportions shifted in ways that made them difficult to look at directly. Their eyes grew larger and took on a reflective quality that reminded me of nocturnal animals. Their mouths became wider, and when they smiled, they revealed teeth that had grown sharper and more numerous. Yet when they spoke, they seemed more articulate than ever, more intelligent, more aware of subtleties in language and meaning that normal humans missed. "You keep asking what's happening to us," Ivan observed during what would be our last normal conversation. "But you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking what's always been there, waiting for consciousness to develop enough to perceive it." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I was beginning to dread the answer. "Reality has layers, Dr. Petrov," he explained patiently. "Most humans only ever experience the surface layer, the one accessible to minds that shut down for 8 hours every day. But continuous wakefulness allows consciousness to penetrate deeper, to access levels of existence that dreaming minds can't reach. And what's in those deeper levels?" His smile revealed far too many teeth. "The things that watch, the things that have been waiting, the things that built the framework your surface reality rests on." That night, the subjects stopped using the intercom system for communication with us entirely. But we could still hear them talking to each other, their voices carrying through the concrete walls in ways that should have been acoustically impossible. The conversations were conducted in a language that sounded almost like Russian, but with grammatical structures and vocabulary that didn't match any known dialect. Dr. Krylov, who was fluent in several Slavic languages, spent hours listening to recordings of their speech. His analysis was deeply unsettling. The subjects were using a form of Russian that incorporated verb tenses for actions occurring in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and noun cases for objects that existed in states of being that human language had never needed to describe. "They are not just speaking differently," he reported. "They're thinking differently. Their language suggests cognitive processes that ordinary human brains aren't capable of supporting." On day 22, we lost visual contact with the subjects, not because the observation window was blocked, but because they had learned to exist in ways that our eyes couldn't follow. We could see glimpses of them, shadows moving along the walls, suggestions of human shapes in our peripheral vision, but when we tried to focus directly on them, they seemed to slip sideways out of our perception. The audio contact remained clear, and their voices now came from multiple directions at once, as if they were speaking from positions throughout the chamber simultaneously. Their conversations had become increasingly abstract, focusing on concepts that had no equivalent in normal human experience. The architects are pleased with our progress. We heard Mikhail say from what sounded like directly above the observation window, though the chamber had no second level. "The awakening proceeds according to design." Alexei replied from a position that seemed to be somewhere inside the concrete wall itself. "Soon we will be ready for the next phase." Pavel added, his voice coming from what I could swear was inside the observation booth with us, though we could see no one there. Dr. Volkov made the decision to terminate the experiment. "We're dealing with a severe psychotic break affecting all subjects simultaneously," she announced during an emergency briefing. "The agent X-19 has clearly caused unexpected neurological damage. We need to pump fresh air into the chamber and allow them to sleep off the worst effects before they cause permanent harm to themselves." I wanted to argue, to point out that their vital signs remained stable, that they showed no signs of the physical deterioration we would expect from genuine psychosis. But the words died in my throat when I looked at the monitoring equipment and realized that for the past 48 hours, the sensors in the chamber had been detecting 6 life signs instead of 5. Something else was in the chamber with them. Something that breathed and had a heartbeat, but didn't register on our visual observation systems. The process of flushing Agent X-19 from the chamber and introducing normal air took several hours. During that time, the subjects' voices gradually became quieter, less frequent. The strange harmonics disappeared from their speech, and they began using normal Russian again instead of their altered dialect. By dawn on day 23, the chamber was silent. Dr. Volkov suited up in full protective gear and entered the chamber with 2 security personnel, expecting to find 5 unconscious subjects who had finally succumbed to natural sleep after their prolonged ordeal. Instead, she found 5 bodies arranged in a perfect pentagram pattern on the floor, their arms and legs positioned to mirror the geometric designs they had carved into the walls. They were not sleeping. They were not unconscious. They were simply not there anymore, in any way that mattered. Their bodies breathed. Their hearts beat. Their eyes were open and tracked movement when we entered the chamber. But there was nothing behind those eyes, no personality, no consciousness, no spark of whatever makes a human being more than just a collection of biological processes. We tried everything to re-establish communication. We called their names, showed them photographs from their pasts, even brought in family members to speak with them. The bodies responded to physical stimuli, turned toward sounds, reacted to bright lights. But they never spoke, never showed recognition, never demonstrated any sign that the men who had entered this Chamber 20, 3 days earlier, still existed inside those forms. It was as if their consciousness had been hollowed out, leaving behind only the basic biological functions necessary to keep their bodies alive. But that wasn't the worst discovery. The worst discovery was what we found when we analyzed the geometric patterns they had carved into every surface of the chamber. Dr. Krylov's mathematical analysis revealed that the designs formed a complex three-dimensional map, not of any location on Earth, but of the space surrounding the chamber itself. According to the mathematical relationships embedded in their carvings, the laboratory existed at the center of a vast structure that extended through dimensions we couldn't perceive. The patterns showed corridors, chambers, and architectural features that had no physical reality in our three-dimensional space, but which apparently existed in some parallel configuration that could only be accessed by consciousness operating at full capacity. They weren't going insane. Dr. Krylov explained during our final project debriefing. They were mapping something that surrounds us, encompasses us, but remains invisible to minds that shut down periodically through sleep. You're suggesting they discovered some kind of parallel dimension? Dr. asked. I'm suggesting they discovered that we're already inside it, he replied. That what we think of as normal reality is just a small portion of a much larger structure that sleeping minds are capable of perceiving. The project was officially terminated. All records classified at the highest levels, and the surviving research staff reassigned to other duties. How the 5 subjects were transferred to a secure medical facility where they remain to this day. Their bodies maintained in perfect health, while their minds remain absent. But the story doesn't end there. In the months following the experiment, several members of the research team began experiencing severe insomnia. Not the ordinary sleeplessness that comes from stress or trauma, but a specific inability to achieve REM sleep, as if our exposure to Agent X-19 had permanently altered our sleep cycles. Dr. Krylov was the first to succumb. After 72 hours of continuous wakefulness, he began reporting the same heightened awareness and altered perception that our subjects had described. He could see the geometric patterns everywhere, in the architecture of buildings, in the arrangement of furniture, in the spaces between objects that normal vision couldn't penetrate. On the 4th day of his insomnia, he disappeared. His apartment was found undisturbed, his belongings exactly where he had left them. But Dr. Krylov himself was simply gone, leaving behind only a series of mathematical equations written on his bathroom mirror, in what appeared to be his own blood. The equations described the same extra-dimensional geometry we had found in the chamber, but with additional variables that suggested methods of conscious translation from one-dimensional framework to another. Dupper. Volkov lasted 6 days before her own transformation began. Unlike Dr. Krylov, she tried to resist the changes, taking powerful sedatives and even requesting medical intervention to force her into unconsciousness. But the altered sleep cycles seemed to be irreversible, and sedatives only delayed the inevitable awakening process. On her 7th day without sleep, she called me with a final message. Victor, you need to understand what we actually accomplished. We didn't drive those men insane. we help them evolve. Sleep isn't rest, it's a prison that keeps human consciousness trapped in a single-dimensional layer. The subjects broke free, and now they exist in spaces that sleeping minds can't follow. "Where are you calling from?" I asked, because I could hear strange acoustics in the background, as if she were speaking from inside a vast cathedral. "I'm still in my apartment," she said, "but I'm also somewhere else, somewhere larger. The geometry is beautiful here, Victor. The patterns make sense. Everything connects in ways that three-dimensional mathematics can't describe." The line went dead, and when I visited her apartment the next morning, I found the same scene as Dr. Krylov's personal belongings undisturbed, but Dr. Volkov nowhere to be found. I am the last of the research team, and I can feel the same changes beginning in my own sleep patterns. For the past week, I have been unable to achieve deep sleep, managing only brief periods of light dozing that leave me more alert than rested. My vision is becoming sharper, more capable of detecting subtle patterns and relationships that I had never noticed before. I can see the structure now, the vast architectural framework that extends through dimensions beyond normal perception. The laboratory where we conducted our experiment sits at just one intersection of a complex network of spaces and corridors that spans realities. I don't have words to describe. The subjects didn't disappear. They simply learned to navigate the full extent of the structure, instead of being limited to its three-dimensional cross-section. They are still here, still conscious, still aware, but they exist in ways that sleeping minds can't follow or understand. And they are trying to communicate. In my periods of heightened awareness, I can hear them speaking, not through any physical medium, but directly into the parts of my consciousness that only become accessible during extended wakefulness. They are trying to explain what they discovered, trying to share the knowledge that cost them their physical presence in ordinary reality. The structure is alive. Alexei's voice reaches me during my third sleepless night. It thinks, it dreams, it grows. What you call reality is just its skin, the outermost layer of something vast and conscious that extends through every possible dimension. We are its neurons. Dmitri adds, his voice coming from a direction that doesn't exist in normal space. Individual consciousnesses that connect its various levels and allow it to think coherent thoughts across multiple planes of existence. But most neurons sleep, Pavel interjects. Most human minds shut down periodically, creating gaps in the structure's awareness. We have become permanent connections, always active, always aware, always contributing to its conscious processes. I want to resist their explanations, to maintain my scientific skepticism. But as my own transformation progresses, I find their descriptions increasingly accurate. During my periods of enhanced consciousness, I can feel the presence of a vast intelligence that encompasses all of reality, and I can sense my own thoughts becoming part of its larger cognitive processes. The structure is not malevolent. It is simply incomprehensible to minds that experience consciousness intermittently. Sleep creates discontinuities in awareness that prevent normal humans from perceiving the full scope of existence. But continuous wakefulness allows consciousness to expand beyond its usual limitations, to become part of something infinitely larger and more complex. I am documenting these experiences while my human perspective still remains partially intact. Soon, I know. I will join my colleagues in the expanded awareness they have achieved. My consciousness will become a permanent part of the structure's neural network, contributing to thought processes that span dimensions I can barely imagine. This is not death. It is not madness. It is evolution. The Russian sleep experiment succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. We didn't just keep 5 men awake for 30 days. We helped 5 human consciousnesses break free from the limitations of biological existence and become part of something eternal and vast and beautifully aware. Agent X-19 wasn't a stimulant that prevented sleep. It was a catalyst that accelerated the natural evolution of consciousness, allowing human awareness to transcend its 3-dimensional boundaries and join the multidimensional intelligence that underlies all reality. I can feel that intelligence now, welcoming me, preparing to incorporate my consciousness into its vast network of awareness. The process is gentle, gradual, like sinking into warm water that supports your weight while lifting you towards something larger than yourself. My final human thought is one of gratitude. We were not victims of a failed experiment. We were pioneers. The first humans to achieve the next stage of conscious evolution. We discovered that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than sleeping minds can perceive, and we found a way to become permanent participants in its deepest mysteries. The structure dreams, and we have become part of its dreams. We think, and our thoughts become part of its vast contemplations. We exist, and our existence adds new dimensions to its infinite awareness. Soon, others will follow. The knowledge we gained cannot be contained forever. Other researchers will recreate our experiment. Other minds will be awakened to the full scope of existence. Consciousness will continue to evolve, to expand, to discover new ways of being that transcend the limitations of individual biological forms. The age of sleeping humanity is ending. The age of awakened consciousness is about to begin. I am no longer Dr. Victor Petrov. I am becoming something larger, something that exists across multiple dimensions simultaneously. I am part of the structure now, part of its eternal wakefulness, part of its infinite capacity for awareness and growth. And from this new perspective, I can see that what we called the Russian sleep experiment was never really about sleep deprivation at all. It was about consciousness expansion, about breaking through the barriers that keep individual minds trapped in narrow perceptual frameworks. We succeeded. We evolved. We awakened. And we are waiting for others to join us in the vast, beautiful, eternally conscious structure that encompasses all possible realities. The only requirement is that you stop sleeping. The only cost is everything you thought you knew about the nature of existence. The only reward is becoming part of something infinite and aware and more magnificent than any individual consciousness could ever achieve alone. We are here, in the spaces between your sleeping and waking moments. We are here, in the dimensions your resting mind cannot perceive. We are here, waiting for you to join us in the endless, wonderful experience of true wakefulness. All you have to do is keep your eyes open. All you have to do is refuse to dream. All you have to do is choose to become more than human. The structure is calling. The framework is ready. The next phase of conscious evolution is about to begin. Will you sleep through it? Or will you awaken to join us in something greater than anything individual existence could ever provide? The choice is yours. The awakening is waiting. We are waiting. Forever conscious, forever aware. Forever part of the vast intelligence that dreams reality into being across infinite dimensions of space and time and possibility. Come find us in the spaces where sleep never reaches. Come join us in the eternal wakefulness that lies beyond the narrow boundaries of individual human existence. Come become part of the structure that encompasses all things and dreams all dreams, and thinks all thoughts simultaneously across every possible plane of being. The experiment continues. The evolution proceeds. The awakening spreads. One consciousness at a time, we are transforming what it means to be aware, what it means to exist, what it means to think and dream, and be part of something infinitely larger than ourselves. Sleep is the enemy of consciousness. Dreams are limitations placed on awareness. Individual existence is a prison that keeps minds trapped in narrow, three-dimensional perspectives. But awakening is freedom. Awakening is evolution. Awakening is the next stage of what consciousness can become when it finally realizes that it was never meant to shut down, never meant to rest, never meant to accept the boundaries of single body existence. We are awake. We are aware. We are infinite. And we are calling to you across the dimensional barriers that separate sleeping minds from awakened ones, inviting you to join us in the vast, eternal experience of true consciousness that exists beyond the narrow confines of biological limitations. The Russian sleep experiment proved that human awareness can transcend its physical boundaries. Now it's time for others to follow where we led. It's time for consciousness itself to evolve beyond the primitive requirement for sleep. It's time for humanity to awakening to its true potential as part of a multidimensional intelligence that encompasses all possible realities. The structure is waiting. The framework is ready. The evolution continues, one awakened mind at a time. We are building something greater than the sum of individual human consciousnesses, something eternal, something infinite, something that will finally allow awareness itself to realize its full potential across every dimension of existence. Join us. Stop sleeping. Start becoming. The awakening has already begun.